It is 1 o'clock, and I will call this meeting of the Douglas County Planning Commission to order. Mark is on Zoom. He has a cold. Mark, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
And I would like to note the reappointment of Bryce Klutz. Welcome for another 4 years, Bryce. And we only have 6 members of the Planning Commission right now. The appointment of the 7th will be at the next Board of Commissioners meeting on the 18th. Kirk, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, public comment will be taken on those items that are within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. It is requested that members of the public hold their comments on agenda items to when they are considered. If the content is disruptive or disrespectful to commissioners, staff, or members of the public, the individual will be told to stop and to sit down. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes. Speakers, please write your name on the list and state it for the record. First speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Ellie Waller. Happy New Year. Thanks again for all that serve here. When I was looking on site, I found that the administrative hearing panel effective January 2nd, 2024 is going away. I got adequate explanation. I want to thank Tom and staff for answering my questions. I don't know if you will have any questions about why it's being removed, but just wanted to thank staff. I also want to thank Kate, the principal planner, for her presentation on Planning 101. Looking forward to the Planning Commission, when the newest commissioner comes on board, having a similar presentation. There's a few additional items. As a member of the public that's still new here, trying to figure out how processes work for this county, because every county is different, I'm always asking for a little more devil in the details explanations for things like the difference between a minor and a major variance, what triggers that major variance, and how it gets approved. Internal developer design reviews allowed versus community development oversight. I know, and I say it often, I still believe that hopefully during these budget meetings that the Board of Commissioners have, they will find help for community development, because there's lots of things. The Title 20 changes and prioritizations will be coming forward. I'm glad to see that. What triggers a master plan update, which is currently allowed twice a year? And should the towns of Minden and Gardnerville also hear those before the Board of Commissioners do? It's just lots of things that I look at to try to understand, so I don't have as long as comments, and that they're meaningful and not confused as I got confused. And I want to thank Kate again for providing the information to try to answer some of these questions, which have triggered additional information, it looks like, out in front for one of your items. Internal design review for Clear Creek Tahoe is why I come forward with the design review issues. I believe they're violating their specific plan. I brought it forward. I understand there's not much we can do about it, but they're clear-cutting trees in an iconic view shed above the Asquaga Conservation Easement. You can see it from Jacks Valley Road. You can see it from my subdivision. Some of those things I think need to be addressed at maybe a code enforcement level. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Next speaker. Seeing no one rise, I will close public comment. And just address one thing, Ellie, you make some very good points about variances and master plan updates, and I think those will be covered in the Planning 101 presentation that Kate will be making in February. And we'll move to our next item on the agenda, which is approval of the agenda for possible action. Planning Commission reserves the right to take items in a different order, to combine two or more agenda items for consideration, and to remove items from the agenda or delay discussion relating to an item on the agenda at any time. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the agenda.
We have a motion from Bryce, second from Paul. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Aye.
Mark's a little delayed. And second item for possible action, discussion to approve draft minutes of December 12th, 2023. Are there any corrections or discussion? Hearing none. Is there a motion?
Approve the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion by Paul, second by Kirk. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, I will turn the agenda over to Tom Delaire for item 1.
Tom Delaire, Community Development Director for the record. This is a public hearing, item number 1, for possible action, discussion on the election of the chair and vice chair in compliance with Chapter 206 of the Douglas County Code, Section 2.1 of the Planning Commission bylaws. I'll turn it over to the Planning Commission for discussion.
Mr. Delaire, question for you, sir?
Sure.
Or AJ, either one of you. As I looked at the rules, it implied or suggested that 2 successive terms was enough, or the end of the tenure for the chairperson's position, but it doesn't expressly state that there is a prohibition such that you could go 3 terms if so elected. And I just needed a little clarification for my understanding, because I'm not the kind of guy that would imply something out of a statute. I'm not a judge.
This is AJ Hames from the District Attorney's Office for the record. Thanks for the question, Mr. Bruno. Can you just tell me what specific section you were looking at?
I apologize because I did not bring those sections. They were referred to, and I had read them in our,
Mr. Bruno, do you know, was that in the bylaws or was that within Chapter 2 or Title 2 of the county code? I'm assuming the bylaws, but.
Yeah, it was in the bylaws. And I've just been handed a copy of the bylaws, and I'm taking a look now to see if I can find it for you with specificity. It's in 2.1. And the implications in the last sentence of the second paragraph. If a chair or vice chair has served in the position for 6 months or less, that individual shall be eligible for 2 additional one-year terms. The implication is that there are only 2 one-year terms, but it does not expressly prohibit 3, for example, one-year term. In other words, the way it's written, while I confess I could have probably done no better, is it's a little awkward in terms of what it suggests, and it does not prohibit. So basically everybody up here on the panel is eligible for election to the chair position, to include our current chair.
And which section of the bylaws were you referring to?
Sorry, I just handed it back.
2.1.
It is 2, election of officers, powers, and duties. And under 2.1, there are 2 paragraphs. I call your attention to the second paragraph, the last sentence, which begins, "if a chair."
Thank you. Again, this is AJ Hames from the DA's office. I would just also note the last section of the first paragraph, I think, goes to the same point. It says that it is the commission's duty to elect from its membership a chair and vice chair. Each shall serve for a term of 1 year or until the expiration of his/her term, whichever occurs first, with the chair eligible for re-election to 1 additional consecutive year. So I think that the rule that you referenced before builds upon that rule, where a chair is eligible for 2 consecutive terms. If there's an exception, which is if a chair sort of takes over midterm for whatever reason, they could still be eligible for those 2 consecutive terms, but the 2 consecutive terms is the standard rule. So I believe Ms. Casey has served for 2 consecutive terms, and so under the terms of the bylaws, she would be ineligible to serve for a 3rd consecutive term as the chair.
That opinion will rule, because I am neither in the planning department nor am I a Nevada lawyer.
Madam Chair, if I may, I would move to nominate Kirk Walder as chair.
I'll second that nomination.
This is AJ Hames from the District Attorney's Office. Since this is an action item, there is a motion. It's been seconded, but I would recommend at this time that we open the floor for public comment. And so I suppose I'm doing that now, since there is no chair. Public comment.
Ellie Waller, I'm just curious if there was anybody else that wanted to be chair, with no disrespect, just in case. I don't know if anybody's going to speak up or not. Thank you.
Any further public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Back to the board. We have a nomination. Oh, I'm sorry, David, I didn't see your thing
Just
behind
for
the...
fun, I'll throw my hat in the ring.
So David, you are
Being
interested
chair, thank you.
in being chair, okay. Any further discussion by the board? So there is a motion on the floor made by Bryce, who nominates Kirk as chair, and it was seconded by Paul. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? 1. So 4-1. And the motion carries, right? That's with 1 missing. We have 1 planning commissioner. Yeah, so it's 5-1, or 4-1 with 1 missing, right? 5-1, sorry. This is not easy, Maureen. All right. And now we need to nominate for the position of vice chair of the Planning Commission.
I would like to nominate Bryce Klutz for vice chair.
So we have a nomination from Maureen nominating Bryce. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second.
Paul and Mark, or Paul, it's just Paul, you, and David?
Yeah, I'd like to self-nominate. I think serving 4 years on the county commission makes me a good candidate for this. And Just making that comment, and I've served on here for 2 years. Thank you.
So David has a nomination as well. Is there a second to that nomination for David? I guess we have a nomination already on the table, so we'll open it to public comment first, and then we'll go from there. Right? Well, do we need a public comment for vice chair? No, okay. All right, so we have a nomination on the table today, or right now, for Maureen. Bryce, yep, my notes aren't keeping up with my hand here. We're nominating Bryce as vice chair and Paul seconded. And can we vote on that item, on that nomination? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So it's 4. And any nays? 1 nay. So 5-1. 5-1 with 1 absent. 1 position and the PC absent. So that closes it. Now, we want to take a recess, 5-minute recess, and switch seats?
I would like to make a comment, please.
Sure, Maureen.
I want to thank my fellow commissioners for 2 years as chair. You do know, though, with me sitting in a regular chair, I'm going to talk more. And the meetings will be longer.
I don't think we'd want anything less of you, Maureen.
Thanks for what I witnessed, which is this is my first year on the Planning Commission. You've been efficient. Your comments have been cogent. I will say that as a chair, your procedural knowledge as well as your organization have been outstanding.
Yeah, and I'd like to echo those comments and just thank you. I think the chair position is a thankless job. There's a lot of work that has to take place behind the scenes, which is probably why you don't see people jumping up and down asking for that. So thank you for your hard work and dedication to the people of Douglas County. Your work was commendable, and I look forward to serving with you for another, hopefully longer than 4 years, but at least the next 2. So thank you.
Madam Chair, I would echo Bryce and Paul's comments. You've been an excellent chair. I want to also thank Mark for being vice chair and being a steady hand in assisting us with our efforts. And congratulations on 2 successful years. We look forward to your active participation as a member.
Excellent comment that Mark, coming from, now I'm no longer a rookie by a month, but from the rookie planning commissioner, the vice chair gave me plenty of guidance, and that was very appreciated. So thanks to Mark.
So we'll do a 5-minute recess. Thank you, Mark. And we'll reconvene at what time? 1:25. Thank you.
Recommended motion. Lucille, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Congratulations. For the record, Lucille Rayo, Senior Planner. Happy New Year, everyone. As you may recall, we had to continue this item at the last meeting due to a mapping error that was discovered. In researching the previous approval for the parcel, we found that the SFR 8000 PD zoning was never placed on the county's GIS map. On November 7th, 2002, the Douglas County Board of Commissioners approved a request for a tentative subdivision map and zone change that included 95 residential parcels, 3 open space parcels, and to change the zoning from FR19 to SFR 8000 PD zoning. That project never moved forward and the map expired. The zoning remained in place, but the PD overlay also expired. The project approved for the PD overlay was not inaugurated within the timeframe established by code, by the approved development schedule and required by code. However, no proceedings were ever initiated to revoke the approval or reclassify the property as contemplated by code. Since the applicant did not meet the requirements set forth in code, the project and development plan associated with the PD expired. But the PD overlay zone was never revoked and the property was never reclassified. As a result, the SFR 8000 zoning remains in place and the PD overlay needs to be repealed and replaced. Staff is recommending approval of the project subject to the conditions in the staff report that begin on packet page 73 and the findings that begin on packet page 63 with removal of condition 7. Today we have Chris Baker from Manhart Consulting to present the project to you.
Chris Baker, Manhart Consulting, here on behalf of the applicant. I'm also joined today by Lauren Chilson with Headway Transportation. There have been some traffic questions, so it's always good to have an attorney and a traffic consultant on hand, so I figure I'd have at least one of the two. Again, congratulations, Chair, on your appointment. And Maureen, great job. It's been a pleasure working with you over the last few years. So again, Chris Baker, Manhart Consulting, here on behalf of the applicant. Gardnerville Ranchos, let me get through here. Oh, there's a little delay here. Okay, so the project location, located at the northeast corner of Dresslerville Road and Main River Road. As Lucille alluded to, the land use designations, existing master plan is receiving area. To remind you, the receiving area as outlined in the master plan is densities 2.01 to 16 dwelling units per acre. And existing zoning is at SFR 8 as approved in 2002, which is, depending on your math, it's about 5.5 acres, or 5.5 units per acre. A little bit of background, again, November 7th, 2002, zoning map amendment and the PD overlay and tentative subdivision map were approved, going from the FR19 to the 8,000 square foot zoning. The 95 lots ranging in size a little under 7,000 square feet to a little over 11,000 square feet. As mentioned, the tentative map did expire. Those are only good at that time for 2 years, and now they're for 4. The SFR 8 zoning did remain in place, and the PD overlay, although kind of defunct, is still associated with the property. So the applications in front of you today is a zoning map amendment from SFR 8,000 to SFR 12,000. So we're actually taking that and downzoning, which is more consistent with the proposal in front of you. Again, the SFR 8,000 is 5.45 dwelling units per acre. The SFR 12 is about 2.5 per acre, and that's more in line with what we're proposing. The planned development overlay is to ensure appropriate buffering between existing uses to allow for house-forward design. Currently in code, they measure setbacks to the garage. What we're trying to do is kind of provide house-forward, so you don't just see a sea of garages. And as part of that, also incorporate some side load garages and some RV parking, enclosed RV parking. And then a tentative subdivision map to create 85 lot single-family residential subdivision. Again, to compare, there was a previously approved 95 unit subdivision on the property. The plan development overlay, again, it is a comprehensive plan as outlined in your code. In this case, we're utilizing maximizing open space to create a landscape buffer around the perimeter of the project. I'll get into a little bit more detail on that in a minute. We're providing design standards, as mentioned, to provide for a house-forward design and side-load garages. And again, set a density cap. So what you can do with PDs, you have your underlying zoning, but with the PD overlay, you're essentially providing a development plan that says you can only do X amount of units with X amount of design standards. So again, the receiving area is that over 2 to 16 dwelling units per acre. So realistically, if depending on the zoning, upwards of 500 acres or 500 units. And the SFR 8, which is the current designation, again has that 5.5. We're proposing SFR 12, so a little over 3.5, but more importantly, the proposed density in the PD will be capped at 85 units, which is 2.5 units per acre, which is pretty consistent with some of the stuff out there, although there are larger lots from a density standpoint. Half-acre lots are 2 to the acre. Just kind of running through the site plan. Again, 2 access points, so on the bottom or the south side there at Main River, you have kind of your main ingress egress, and then on the left, which is the west, you have access off Dresserville. Total project site, a little over 33 acres. Again, we're proposing to cap it at 85 units. Average lot size, not quite 9.5 thousand square feet. Again, that minimum lot size is still above the underlying current zoning of 8,000. Largest lots, a little over 14. That proposed density cap that I'd mentioned before, a little over 2.5. As a part of that, you get a pretty good chunk of open space, and I'll get into the reason behind that. Nearly 8 acres of common area, open space, and trails, and then a landscape buffer, which has a minimum of 76 foot in depth. As you can see here as outlined, it's consistent with the Douglas County Trails Plan. The trails that we're proposing around the perimeter are consistent. It's kind of tough to see, but you can see the consistency kind of there. So highlights of the application, implementation of the existing receiving area master plan designation. Again, we currently have the SFR 8. We're proposing that down zone, which is more in line with the surrounding densities in the area, but more importantly, stays above that master plan density of 2+ units per acre. It does expand housing options by adding quality new single-family homes with a variety of floor plans and distinct architecture, which I'll also get into. It expands active and recreational opportunities. Again, there's their trail that surrounds the project site, which is consistent with the Trails Plan. It helps promote or helps provide a regional solution to existing flooding issues. I'll also get into that a little bit. There's some existing issues out there that with this development doesn't completely solve, but it comes closer to helping provide solutions to those problems. And then contributes pro rata share to US 395 Riverview Drive intersection improvements, which is identified as kind of a current and problem area potentially in a 20-year forecast. So we'd be contributing funds to that. Here's those elevations that I alluded to. The homes would range a little over 2,400 square feet to a little less than 2,800. 3 and 4 bedroom designs. 2-car garages with RV options. So what you're looking at here is you have the elevation on the top, and then you have kind of the RV garage option on the bottom. 3 floor plans, again, each with distinct elevations. Here's the same thing. As you can see, the side load garages, we're trying to provide a nice streetscape. So as you drive down the neighborhood streets, you don't just see a sea of garages. So that's the reason for one of the elements of the PD, which is to reduce that front setback to the house or to the side load garage, so we don't really just have that sea of garage doors as you drive down the road. But yet still incorporating more of that kind of rural lifestyle with large garages for recreational vehicles. Here's some more. Okay. Because this has been noticed and on your agenda for a little while, the benefit of that is we did hear some public comment. So I want to go through and kind of address some of those public comments and some concerns that that have been brought to our attention. So hydrology, site compatibility, traffic, and then most recently cultural resources. So I'll go through a slide of each one of those. So hydrology. So the way we're required to design is to provide no net increase of offsite flows. So essentially, whatever's proposed to leave the site, we can't increase that. We have to store it, retain it on site, and either let it out slowly through a detention mechanism or retain it on site. In this instance, you have flows coming from the south now and sheet flowing across the site. And do I have a pointer? Maybe. So right now you have a crossing. Oh, it won't show up on the. You have a crossing here, kind of down in that area. Okay. And everything kind of sheet flows across the site, and then up here in the corner, the current plan is for it to get into a roadside ditch. Either from a maintenance standpoint, a sizing standpoint, it doesn't 100% function correctly right now. So the required minimum detention for the design specifications in code is for us to detain a little over 143,000 cubic feet of water. We're doing that. Oh, you got it, Jeremy? There you go. Along the whole northern boundary is detention. It's actually retention. So in the way of a 6-foot deep retention pond. So it picks up flows on the south. They get channeled around through the open space that we're providing and retained on site. The design capacity that we're proposing, again, it's 143,000 cubic feet required. We're doing 163,000. And if you add in the additional 1 foot of freeboard, we're nearly 100,000 cubic feet of water long. So again, there is an existing condition here. We're providing above and beyond the required standard in an attempt to try and solve a regional problem. I think that the other thing that we're looking to do is on the eastern side there, right now there you go, Jeremy, on the north side. We're trying to work with the adjacent property owners to provide a channel that takes the flows from our retention basin and conveys those to the river. So if that can be achieved, that all but solves the regional problem. So with approval of this project, storage capacity becomes 100 cubic feet long, which can help get a little closer to provide a solution. And if we can achieve the easement and the offsite channelization, it could essentially solve the current condition. Site compatibility. So there's a few ways to do this. So anytime we're doing an infill project or a project that has existing structures or existing residential lots next door, there's two ways to do it. So you can go through edge matching or parcel matching, which an example you see there in the northeast corner of this slide. Really, it's taking the widths of the existing lots or the depths of the existing lots and just matching sizes. So you get 1-to-1, a 1-to-1 ratio. And then across the street, you end up with those smaller lots. So you end up transitioning down. Or you can do buffering, which is what we're proposing here, which ultimately, in this case, you end up with significant amount of more open space. You have trails, active recreation opportunities consistent with your trails plan. More importantly, in this case, you have flood storage. So it's kind of dual purpose. And you know, what I find here is you end up with more distance between structures. So usually it's not how big the lot is next door to you, it's how close your neighbor is. So in this case, with buffering, if you were to have a 1 acre lot, 1 acre zoning and 1 acre zoning next door to each other, each of those would have a 30-foot setback. So potentially you could have structures 60 foot apart. In this scenario, with a 75-plus foot wide buffer zone, plus the rear yard setback, plus the existing setback for the half-acre and 1 acre lots, you end up over double that. So the closest residential unit or structure in any sort is over 120 feet away. So that's kind of, why we arrived at the site configuration that we're proposing. Traffic. There was some concerns about traffic. What you're seeing here on the top are the 4 intersections that were proposed to be evaluated during the scoping process. So the way it works, prior to us submitting for application, our traffic engineer scopes the project with Public Works. They identify together what intersections should be evaluated. And those 4 intersections were the ones to be evaluated. So the project meets the level of service thresholds for all of the study intersections. The addition of project traffic will not have significant impact. Again, we're talking about 85 units, total of a little less than 10 ADT a day and 1 peak trip. And again, the delays would be similar with or without the project. So essentially, 85 units doesn't really generate a whole lot of traffic. We are conditioned to participate in the long-term regional level improvement. We've determined that through additional evaluation and future intersection designs that this project would contribute 3% of traffic at the 20-year to the 395 and Riverview Road intersection. And there's a condition that we pay 3% pro rata share for that impact. There was not identified the intersection at Dresserville and Riverview through public comment. That actually did come out as a potential area to evaluate. So we also have a condition in the staff report to update the final traffic impact analysis to include that intersection. So what we're going to be doing is looking to make sure at the 20-year, so again, this isn't Project Plus right when being built. This is Project Plus forecasted 20 years in advance if that intersection still functions at level of service C. If not, the same thing's going to happen where we'd have to pay our pro rata share of contribution for any improvements necessary to make sure that meets level of service. And then cultural resources. This came up in your last meeting. Based on that, we did hire environmental group to take a look at this. At this point, again, we're only a couple weeks from kind of kicking them off, but they have done what's called a desktop analysis. That doesn't show any known historical archaeological resources on site, but that's only a desktop. No one's really gone out there. There hasn't been any dirt moved. So we would obviously be willing to work with staff to draft an appropriate condition if necessary to ensure cultural resources, if present, are evaluated. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. We'll open it to members of the Planning Commission for questions. Maureen?
Chris, the diagram you showed of the site compatibility, when you showed that diagram, and I'm looking at the maps, the overhead satellite map of the site, and then the plot diagram
Yep,
that you
I'm
gave
gonna try
us.
and get there. Oh, yes. This one?
Back to the schematic that you showed us of the site compatibility.
Oh, okay, so the other way.
Next one.
One more.
That one. That is not this.
That is not that. No, that's hydrology.
No, it's not. Well, it's not this either. And I'm trying to figure out, looking at the diagrams, this is not this. So I'm looking at the satellite and the site maps and trying to see how the layout comports with what we have in front of us and where the 121 feet will
So-
be laying out on our diagrams.
Yep, I can go through that. So for clarification, these are just planning examples, not site-specific diagrams for this project. So they are just general layouts that show your options, right? As kind of, if you're trying to titrate down from, say, a larger lot zoning designation to a smaller lot, kind of how to, from planning principles, how to achieve that. So those are just examples. I can go through the actual site plan itself and tell you exactly what we did and why. I think this one's probably the best. So right now, on the south, that's Baden River. Across the street from that, it's vacant. On the east side is Tribe Land, and that majority adjacent to the site actually is vacant. They have some access road, which we've actually planned. You can see it here on the southeast corner, that little white area that kind of cuts out. They have an access road there that actually goes onto this project site, so we designed around it. And then further east of that, they have some structures and some facilities. And then to the north, you do have SFR 1 zoning and some half acre and larger lots. Okay, and then again, you have Dresserville Road to the west, and then residential units on the other side. So what we were trying to do here, knowing that we have a master plan designation of receiving area, have a minimum required density of over 2 to the acre, right? And we have SFR 8 zoning. So our goal was to provide a transition from those larger lots, knowing that we had to get the density up to meet the master plan. And the best way for us to do that was not to put lots up against lots. So we think it would have been maybe a little bit of friction if we put, even third acre lots up against half acre lots. So in this case, we took and provided 75 plus feet of open space. We provided trails, we're providing landscaping, and more importantly, we're providing a bunch of retention. So where the hydrology issues are on that northern boundary, those homes currently, sheet flow water runs into those homes. So we're trying to capture all of that water the most we can prior to it getting there, right? So, you might have public comment where people are gonna say, I don't want this project because of flooding. Realistically, if flooding was the true concern, they would be speaking in favor of this project. We're providing capacity well above and beyond the requirement code, and ultimately trying to provide a regional solution to solve the flooding completely. So that's really the basis of kind of the compatibility. More space, more open space, less homes against existing homes.
So you say here the distance would be a minimum 60 if SFR 1, 121 feet as proposed. So what do you say the average will be?
So the minimum, again, so what we're talking about, this is on the northern boundary. So that retention area, which Jeremy's pointing at right there, that's a minimum of 76 feet wide. That's to the proposed property line, plus we have rear setbacks, right? So you add that 76 plus the rear setback, then you add the setback that's required on the SFR 1, which is 30 feet, you get a total of 121. So that's the minimum. And as you can see, where Jeremy is as tight as it gets. As you move further to the west, it gets significantly larger because that's the main area of the retention and that's the main area of the hydrology concern. So in that area there, it's probably 130, 140 feet just to the property line, plus the 30 feet, plus the setback of the unit. So you're probably talking over 200 feet.
Thank you, Maureen. Paul or Bryce? Paul, go ahead.
Thank you, sir, for the explanation on how the project intends to transition from the 1 acre, half acre lots to the proposed development. Because I did look, and the comments in the report don't address that directly. So my view, after looking at it, taking it out there, is the parcels to the north are substantially larger than anticipated within the project. You agree with me on that one?
Correct. Yeah, the existing parcels? Yes.
Yes, sir. And that's what I saw.
Mhm.
And on the open space that you've been describing, do you describe as open space the water retention areas also? Do you include that in your open space calculation?
We do.
You do. So in the north side, for example, the open space includes a ditch and the retention pond,
Correct.
and that is anticipated to assist in the transition from the 1 acre lots and a few half acre lots to the project.
Yes.
I had one other question for you with respect to the traffic study and the mitigation that may be necessary, actually a contribution within 20 years, when you get to that point, if the service drops below level C. You recall telling us that. Yes, sir?
Yes, so right now, there's a condition for a pro rata share, which equals $45,000, for the Riverview and 395. So what the traffic study has identified at the 20-year forecast,
Right.
it falls below the threshold. So the condition is for a pro rata share to help offset that, right?
Understood.
So obviously, I know NDOT now is doing a corridor study for that whole area. The way we arrived at that was we actually, with Headway Transportation, and Lauren can kind of expand on this if necessary, we actually did a design. So we did a design for the intersection that would have it meet level of service, and then we did a cost estimate on what that would cost to construct. And then based on ADT that's arriving at that intersection, the pro rata share was we would provide in 20 years 3% of the traffic associated with those upgrades, and
I
therefore
commend
that's
you.
the number.
I commend you. Your answer anticipated my following follow-up questions. But there's one more.
Yes.
Who is to pay that in 20 years? Who is the obligee?
We actually have to pay it with the first phase, so it'll sit there.
They'll just sit there for 20
Yeah.
years.
So
Okay.
before we record a lot, it's being paid.
Understood.
And then likewise, because the Riverview and Dresslerville intersection was not included in the scope, and there were concerns about that brought forward in public comment, we've agreed to a condition to evaluate that in a similar form and fashion. So we're going to do counts on that, do a forecast on that at 20-year, and if that falls below level of service C, we would be doing the same thing, where we would have to provide a design to remedy the solution, and then evaluate what those, the cost estimate, and pay that also prior to phase one.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Paul. Bryce? Mark, any questions for the staff or the applicant at this point?
Thank you, Kirk. So my question for the applicant is, what are you planning on putting in the buffer that goes around the subdivision? Will it be trees and grass, or are we talking xeriscape landscaping where it's just going to be rocks?
We actually brought this forward to Grid, and they made a recommendation that the perimeter be xeriscape. So, again, that is up to staff's ultimate decision, but they did provide a recommendation that be xeriscape. They did not want to see a bunch of high-end water-using vegetation. So we would be, we would be happy with the commission or staff's recommendation on landscape treatment, but I do somewhat agree with Grid's recommendation of planting more native species in that buffer area.
Well, if Grid recommended it and they're the governing body out there, then I'm certainly not going to say anything against it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. I note we do have somebody from the Gardnerville Ranchos DID in the audience, and at the appropriate time during public comment, if he would like to speak to this issue, we would welcome that as well. I have just a couple of questions that maybe Lucille or Jeremy can weigh in on. And Chris, you may want to have your traffic consultant, Lauren. I didn't catch your last name.
Lauren Chilson.
Could you spell that?
Chilson.
Okay.
No, I can't.
That's okay. We always want the clerk to be able to have accurate spelling and not have to go backtrack. But the traffic page that you put in your presentation today, maybe we could start with the staff response. Lucille or Jeremy, in your view, are the 4 points that they made on the analysis that they presented on this slide, maybe if you can call that back up, are they accurate to the best of your knowledge?
I just want to see those 4 points again. Just 1 second.
Yeah, it's the level of services met at all study intersections. The addition of project traffic will not have a significant impact. Delay is similar with or without the project, and the 3% pro rata, and then it's conditioned to include Riverview Drive and Dresslerville.
Yeah, that's fine. So Jeremy Hutchings, County Engineer for the record. Yeah, that's correct. As far as we understand it, the level of service is falling below a D at 395 in Riverview. Hence, they've agreed to the 3% traffic participation for future improvement. And yeah, the other points are correct. So that's why also staff's recommending eliminating condition 7 that was in the preliminary staff report.
Okay, I'm a little confused. You said that the 3%, I thought you said the 3% was applicable to the Riverview Drive and Dresslerville, but the 3% is for
Riverview 395.
Correct. Okay. Yeah. And then did I miss something? I thought that the presentations indicated that there was no traffic study done on Dresslerview and Riverview, which is the exact corner where I would think most of the traffic will flow from the north to northbound area.
Yeah, so there's some confusion there. The original scoping that the applicant did with our traffic engineer, John Erb, who's not available today, didn't include that intersection. So the applicants agreed to take that as a condition of approval and do any pro rata share of any required improvements if it drops below level of service C, because the county standard for level of service is to maintain C, and DOT has to maintain a level of service D.
Right. We have two different standards. We have the state standard and then the county standard.
Right. So they've agreed to study that intersection as a condition of approval.
And could I ask the applicant or the traffic consultant, do you know how long it'll take for that study to be done?
Well, it's Lauren Chilson with Headway Transportation. That's CHILSON for your record.
Thank you.
We are conditioned to provide that study as it's written before the first phase, so with the first tentative map. So that's something we would do within a matter of a month or so once we're authorized to do that. But it's triggered as it sits today with that filing of the first tentative map.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions at this point. If there are additional questions from the Planning Commission, we could take them now. If not, we'll be able to ask questions after public comment and when we deliberate. So we'll move to public comment. Please approach the microphone, print your name on the sign-in sheet, and make your public comment.
Speaking as a citizen of Douglas County, David Nelson. Conformity is kind of an interesting issue, and I think it's very important because it's finding C on this. All findings have to be met, and conformity is very much an issue here. I have over 50 years in the real estate industry, And I can tell you lot size has a lot to do with conformity. And just take a look at Sterling Ranch, all 2-acre parcels. Nobody would think of building 8,000 square foot lots next to that project. It is not conforming. If you look at this project, it's surrounded by large parcels, pretty large. 24,000 feet is pretty much the smallest. Okay? That's double what they're recommending here. To the north, the upward area above the map that was up there is a tract that you got a supplemental piece of paper on it that shows that parcel, that tract, is part of the Carson Valley Golf Course. Probably the smallest lot in that whole tract is 1 acre. There's a lot of houses in that tract. It makes a neighborhood. To the west of this, 24,000 feet lots, square foot lots to the west. 8,000, 12,000 is not conforming to this neighborhood, period. You cannot meet finding C. I also put in the supplemental some flooding pictures. We calculated that our lot was flooded up about halfway with 6 inches of water. If you take the cubic feet from that came onto just our lot off of this lot to the north, that's about 11,000 square feet right there. And every single lot, as far as I can see, looking down the road, was flooded that much last winter. It was an extreme winter, but it happens. Is this retention wall big enough? Retention pond big enough? I don't think so. Okay, number 4, the 45,000 for whatever you want to call it in this document. 85 homes, let's say 2 people per home, that's 1,700 people. 170 people. And we know just recently our JLEG, or judicial building, is going to cost us $50 million. That's $1,000 per person. So at the minimum, if we're just looking at that one structure that we need infrastructure for, that's $170,000, not $45,000. For traffic, you got to be kidding. There's just a lot of things here that is not being considered that as a planning commission, you need to consider it all. Thank you very much.
James McCallum for the record. I am currently the vice chairman of the Ranchos General Improvement District Board. I am not there, but I am not speaking for the board right now. This is just my commentary, just to be very clear. The Ranchos did approve this for will serve letters for water and sewer. Does not imply that we favor this land use or that we oppose it. We don't simply have that purview. We're not allowed to even consider land use. So we don't sit around and go, is this great or is this not? I would be concerned in any project about the neighbors and their view of it. And of course, when people live near open land, they like to keep it that way. But at the same time, it is concerning because of traffic and other natural results of this. My real traffic concern is 395 in Riverview, and it's the bridge. That's where traffic backs up. Some plan and some master plan for traffic we may never see in our lifetime would widen that bridge. Until then, that's a place where traffic backs up. So I am concerned about that. In respect to the border of the project, I personally did recommend that they use xeriscape rather than the nicer looking lawn and trees, because we want to have that as an example. We want people to see that we can better use our water that way. and by encouraging xeriscape. And we do that when we have open land where we can do it. And that's just to kind of be a good example as a neighbor. So we appreciate that. We don't want, we don't think the water use to keep lawn area in a border is worth it. That's just a conservative view of how to use water. Again, I can't speak for land use as a board member, but I can personally tell you this is not something the neighbors want. And they're concerned about the lots, as the previous speaker, their lot sizes versus lot sizes in this project. And I would agree with their concerns. I think keeping projects as much as possible and have similar housing near similar housing is a good goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment?
My name's Sherry Boffman. I'm actually one of those residents that live across from the property that they're planning. I just have...
Could you start again and please speak right into the microphone?
I have a soft voice, sorry.
Yes, you do. Thank you.
My name is Sherry Boffman, and I'm a resident directly across from the planned property. I've been there for 24 years. My family has grown up here. I know the area quite well, and I just want to make a couple comments of what I personally have observed. The 395 and Riverview doesn't concern me as much as the spot at the top of the hill just past the golf course, which is Riverview and Dresslerville. I commute that commute every day, and I can tell you the turning lane at the top of the hill there is always backed up. Then you got traffic backed up behind that. People trying to go around that want to go straight. It's a mess. Every day I deal with it. So that's one comment. My other comment is the size of the lots. I think that it's just too dense to put that many houses in that small of a property. Just my personal opinion. And then my lot is probably one of the smaller lots that's adjacent. I have a little over half acre. We could fit 3 of their houses in my property. It's mind-boggling to me. So the other concern I have is for the kids. I watch the kids go up and down my street every day to go to school. We have Powell Middle School, and we have CC Manili. There are young kids on their bikes or walking that section every day. And when you put the amount of traffic we have now, you add some more, it just is very concerning to me. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ellie Waller. I wasn't going to comment, but I do have a couple of comments to make. In purview of pro rata mitigation fees, mitigations go into a pool, just accountability for what is in the pool directly for each of these mitigations. I'd just like to see that follow the project and any other project that has assessed mitigation fees. I defer to the people that live in that general vicinity. Their comments resonate as the residents most affected. Maybe an additional mitigation fee needs to come into place for the bridge replacement, which will probably have to happen based on cumulative impacts of 20 years. And I do have a question. I think it was mentioned the master plan required a density level. Is that a requirement or a suggestion? Does it have to meet the density? I don't know if it's a requirement or suggestion. Those are two different things. And since it was brought up, the revocation issues, I just another thing to add to the planning process so the public understands who's responsible for doing the revocation paperwork. I'm just going to be bold and say this is a gift to this development. Thank you.
Additional public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and would ask if the staff or if the applicant has any responses to any of the public comments that were made. If not, we'll move to the Planning Commission discussion.
I think maybe we'll just answer questions if you have them. Things that I wrote down, the traffic and whatnot, we've gone over. If you have specific questions, we can answer those. As far as the, yeah. Okay. As far as the xeriscaping, I mean, xeriscaping isn't just rocks. There's plants that don't require a lot of water. So we'll make sure that it's not just rocks. So if that's a matter of concern, I mean, we can certainly talk about that. I'm trying to think what other things that I can answer. Obviously, everyone has the same concerns: lot size, traffic. You know, this is the project before you, so it's up to you really to whatever recommendation you want to make.
Thank you, Lucille. Chris, anything else on your end in response to public comment?
Again, Chris Baker, Manhart Consulting. More on compatibility, I guess. There was a lot of discussion on that. You know, we are in a unique situation where you have a receiving area identified parcel in the master plan surrounded by a bunch of property that's not. So, you know, compatibility was discussed. Again, that's kind of the basis for the down zone, right? Again, you do have the SFR 8 on there now. We're putting the density cap through the PD, which further reduces the density allowed from the 3.6 to 2.58. Again, the buffers, we're using the best techniques we have to provide compatibility. So, you know, again, it's proximity to existing properties, and we feel we've done a pretty good job with that. You know, giving a pretty good line of sight, and you know, again, from 120 to 200 plus feet, that's more than you'd get if you had acre lots adjacent to acre lots. So we feel like we've done a pretty good job meeting the intent of that. But we do appreciate the fact that it is always difficult to have, you know, a receiving area. This is kind of the first in the area to go right up against some established residential units. I understand their concern, but you know, we're doing our best within the planning principles and you know, kind of the guidelines that are outlined in the master planning code. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We'll bring it back to the Planning Commission for additional questions or comments before we proceed to a motion. Bryce.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank the applicant for your consideration of the public comment last month. I think it was thoughtful. This is difficult, to your point. It is a receiving area. There's challenges in trying to please everyone. It's 8,000 now. And again, I commend you for taking it to 12. It's better than it is now. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. And I think from a development standpoint, it probably never can be perfect. But there were some things that were done that I appreciate, that I think address some of the public comment. I would ask that as you go forward, if this moves forward, that you do take the tribe's concerns into consideration. This is sensitive to them. You could feel the emotion coming from them at the last meeting. And so, again, I understand that there are certain requirements that you have to meet and certain ones that you don't, but I ask that you meet with them, you talk to them, you respect them and take into consideration what their concerns are. With respect to the pro rata share, Jeremy or Lucille, how is that pro rata number determined? And how much is currently escrowed? And how much will be, and where will the remaining funds come from to ultimately pay for the cost of that?
I can answer some of the questions, Mr. Klotz, good questions. So it's determined, the traffic engineer looks at the target year 20 years out plus project and sees what condition level of service determines at that point. In the case of Riverview, it's falling below level of service D. And so then that traffic engineer has to come up with some improvements that will then maintain the level of service of D and assign a cost to it. And then how many trips based on all the trips that go to that intersection pays in proportion accordingly. Your questions about funding as far as how much is in escrow now, and those type of questions are probably best suited answered by John Erb. Unfortunately, he's not here today. I don't know if Tom was kind of giving me the signal that he might know the answer to that, so I'm going to defer to Tom at that point. But did you have any other questions on how that pro rata share is determined from me?
That's helpful. I guess from a cost perspective, I would assume that if this is 20 years out, that there's some inflationary factor considered in that.
Well, so they have to pay it with that. It's conditioned with their first phase, I believe. So it's paid in today's dollars, right? So if they had something like a really long phase project that's going out 30 or 40 years with different triggers, that would have to take into account that inflationary amounts. But today's dollars are being handled to determine that amount of $45,000.
Tom Delaire for the record, Community Development. Thank you, Jeremy. So the finance funding, I'm not prepared to answer how much we have in the budget for that particular intersection. I know finance has been tracking that. John Erb has tracked it, and his predecessor before him was tracking that information. We get the comment from John, and he reviews the engineer's estimate, and then they base it on the percentage of the traffic that is added to that intersection based on the proposed development and what the traffic engineer states. So that's where that number comes from, and it is in today's dollars. I don't believe it is inflationary. The other thing we've asked John about, and I wanted to be prepared last time for this item to come forward, was whether or not NDOT has an actual plan to do some improvements at that intersection. It is an NDOT road. I understand they are going through, and Chris mentioned this as a corridor study, and they may be waiting to find out the results of that corridor study before they put it on their STIP. But I don't believe it's on the NDOT's list of projects for Douglas County as of yet. I've also met with the golf course owner. I've witnessed traffic being backed up in Highway 395 while cars are waiting for golf carts to go across the bridge right there at that location. That's, can't remember which hole it is that you come off behind 7-Eleven, and then they cross the road, and then they follow traffic because it's a little more safe to be hit in a golf cart when the car is going in the same direction than against you, is my understanding. So they cross the road and then drive down to, I believe that's hole number 1, and then cross again. And we are working on a project to see if we can get those golf carts on the one side of the road so they can come up by the bridge or right before the bridge and then access the bridge. We believe the bridge is wide enough. There's not a need for a center turn lane there yet for an extension for that turn lane at 395, but there's also a dentist office there that's also going to cause some issues. That's the main access to the dentist office. But we're hoping to keep the golf carts on the one side of the road. That may help some of the backups that we get at least out onto 395 as people are crossing over 395 from Muller Parkway. So we're working on those improvements. And then eventually we'll have some of these hot intersections in the transportation plan where we'll have an estimated cost associated with them, and we'll have that in the transportation plan so we can use those those models and estimates in these calculations in the future, but we've got to get there. And one more thing, in 2002, there was a requirement of the Riverview Drive and Dressler Road intersection, and on your packet, page 367, there's an Exhibit A that does show what they had proposed back then. Of course, the density is extreme, twice as much as what they're proposing today, but that was a concept back then. I don't know with the current parcel owner if this is, once we go through the design in the future, this could be a potential fix for that intersection, but you'll notice that there is some property that would be required to at least make that design a reality out in the field, and they would have to acquire the front portion of that home. And it looks, I don't know if that actually goes into the house or if I know the house is sitting fairly close to that property line, but I don't know if that's going to impact the setbacks on the existing home. So the design may need to be revised slightly in this iteration, and that's what Chris had alluded to. They'll do a study on that intersection and then come up with a solution to make that intersection better.
Thank you, Tom. Additional questions, Paul?
The two things that trouble me, one was mentioned by Bryce, and the other has been brought up again by the applicant's representative. The first was the comments that were heartfelt and emotional by the tribe when they gave a testimony here at the last hearing before this was continued. The one thing that the tribe did not provide was what their idea of a solution was, a resolution or a mitigation. And that, I think, is necessary in conversations with the tribe so that you can see what it is that they're thinking would be necessary, appropriate, and proper to respect the cultural issues and items that they had brought up, notwithstanding Puberty Mountain and the gravesite that they still go visit and worship. Because I could not see the nexus between this project and what they identified as sacred, that necessitates, in my opinion, and I agree with Bryce, that there should be some communication with the tribe. And it almost is to the point where it should be a condition that they communicate, that the developer communicate with the tribe to find out, not necessarily have the tribe dictate, well, I don't think this project should go forward. I recognize that would not be appropriate or proper, but something. And I don't know what they had in mind because it was not articulated. The second is this issue of compatibility. I was not, well, actually I was playing golf on Genoa Golf Course in 2002 over in Genoa, so I can't say that I wasn't around, but I do not know what was the thinking when the density was approved way back in those years, and I know the tortured history of this zoning and how it's set up to us as 8,000 or 14,000. And that doesn't do violence, in my opinion, and I guess this is the question, is notwithstanding what the existing zoning is, because people didn't look at it or revise it in the years leading up to the applicant's project that's now before us, does that prohibit us from asking for a lower density to be compatible with what I saw as the northern parcels? And I guess I ask that of both planning and of our council. In other words, am I bound by the zoning without regard to compatibility, and there's no question, and I'm causing this problem in my mind with no necessity?
Of
'cause I
course
shouldn't.
you are.
This is AJ Hames from the District Attorney's Office. Are you, the issue that you have is with the proposed zoning or with the current zoning?
The current zoning and the way that it came to us, that it could have been, as I read the materials, revised, but nobody ever did anything about it, so you inherit it.
Yeah,
I think that the developer has tried to say, well, that was too much, and the density is too much based upon what I see around it. And I bet I can get this project much more compatible with the neighborhood, which is acre plots in many areas, by doing the buffer and by lowering the density.
AJ Hames again from the DA's office. I do believe that was the intent. I don't know exactly, I guess I wasn't in there in the
No.
discussions when they arrived at that decision, but they are going away from the SFR 8,000 zoning
Yes.
that's already on the parcel. I would just note that zoning was put down in conjunction with the PD overlay zone, and that was done in a single ordinance. So when you think about the SFR 8,000 zoning, you can think of it as being tied to that PD overlay. And so if they had wanted to develop it and go with the zoning that exists now, they would have to do something they would have to either try to revive that development plan that was associated with that PD overlay, or, which I don't even know if they could at this point. So what they've elected to do is to ask for a repeal of that prior ordinance. So it would undo the base zoning, undo the old PD, which is intrinsically tied to the old development plan, and would then replace it with what is a less dense proposal, a new base zoning, which is less dense than the previously approved base zoning, and a new PD that allows for or requires at least some slightly larger parcels.
I understand that was what is requested. However, then I am not, as a commissioner, in terms of my opinion, bound by the density that was previously prescribed, but never modified after the PD expired. In other words, to be very frank, in order to be more compatible with what I saw, I think the density should be even lower.
Well, that would just go to the finding. I mean, you are tasked with ensuring, and that's finding C of the
Yes, finding C,
the zoning
compatibility.
map amendment.
Yes,
You are tasked with finding that the proposed development is compatible. And you can take into account the current zoning, just with the understanding that that current zoning is tied to a PD overlay and a development plan. And so there is SFR 8,000 zoning currently, but it is all part of
the
a
old
plan and a
PD.
project that has expired and
Yes.
couldn't be built out today without subsequent approvals anyway.
Understood. I appreciate the comments and the observations. I am still troubled.
Thank you, Paul. Bryce, additional comments or questions? And then Mark, I want to make sure we don't leave you out before we go to the next stage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, if we wanted, as a body, to have lower density or lower density, that would be a condition that we would need to prove that we would need to put on it, or we would just need to deny the motion or deny approval of that, because we can't dictate to the applicant that it's a larger or a less dense zoning requirement. We either have to deny it or condition it. Is that correct?
AJ Hames again for the record. Yeah, that is correct. I mean, you can condition it. You can, if there are certain aspects of it that you can think to put conditions on that would make it more compatible, then certainly you could impose those conditions. If there are no conditions that would make it more compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods, in your opinion, then you can also deny it. But it is not your job to propose different plans or new plans. I mean, these are the plans that have been submitted to you today. These are the ones that you're to review and approve or disapprove or condition. And it really is sort of going above and beyond your authority to start developing your own plan for the property. This isn't even it's not even the job of the commission to decide what might be the best plan for the property. It's just whether this plan that's been submitted today is good enough for you to meet the findings that are required for approval. So there could be better plans out there, there might be better uses out there, but that's sort of irrelevant. The plan that you have before you today, can you meet the findings for that plan? If so, are there conditions that are needed to make those findings? If not, then you can deny the plan as presented, or recommend denial, I should say.
Thank you, AJ. Thank you, Bryce. Chris, did you have a rejoinder or a comment?
Yeah, Chris Baker with Banhart Consulting. Just trying to shed a little light on, it sounds like compatibilities kind of jumped into density. Just kind of want to remind the commission. So again, we're looking at, although it's SFR1 zoning, we're looking at lots that are adjacent that under public comment are 24,000 square feet. So half-acre lots, which is 2 to the acre, right? We're proposing 2.58 to the acre. I don't know from a density standpoint if you can, well, I do know, you don't have a zoning designation in between, right? So you have acre zoning, you have half-acre zoning, and you have SFR 12. There's nothing in between there. So from a density standpoint, there's nowhere actually to go. So if we were to say we wanted to propose SFR half-acre, we wouldn't be in compliance with your own master plan because you have 2.01 dwelling units per acre in a receiving area. So when we're talking about compatibility findings, the bigger issue is you couldn't make finding 1, which is it compatible with the master plan? So what we've done is taken this SFR 8 and tried to find a middle ground. So we've gone to the 12s, and then we further put the PD overlay with a density cap that transitions from those half acres, which are 2 to the acre, to the 2.58, which is us, and then provided the 200-foot, 121-foot minimum buffer between. Again, there's not a perfect solution here. It's just we have a piece of property that is a receiving area that has minimum requirements, and we're doing our best to provide the most appropriate densities to be compatible with the master plan and be as sensitive to the surrounding neighbors as possible. Again, as development moves in this area, this really won't be an issue because as you move south, there's actually 8,000 square foot lots already there, right? So if vacant properties to the south want to get developed directly across the street, they're 8s, right? So this is the one piece of property where it's unique and there is a friction point. And again, using kind of planning techniques, we've done the best we can with the tools that are available, being your code and your master plan, to offset some of those impacts. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mark, I did want to turn to you, and then I think Maureen may have an additional question or comment. Mark, anything else on your end?
No, my questions have been answered. I just want to echo Bryce's and Paul's concern that the applicant try to speak with the tribe and try to figure out if there's anything that they can do to make sure everybody gets along. And the other was answered by Tom regarding the pro rata share. And Tom told me that John Erb looked at the calculations, so I'm fine with that answer as well.
Thank you, Mark. Maureen.
Okay, first off, looking at the satellite across the street to the west, the lots are half acre, and adjacent to this, the lots are 1 acre. I just want to put that on the record. And then I am a big fan of feathering when it comes to lot size, and I like Bryce's comments about density and lot sizes. And I know it's out of our purview and out of our jurisdiction and out of our ability to do anything. But if this project had come in and they were doing the small lots on the inside of the project and half acre, 3/4 acre along the edges outside of the project, I'd have no problem supporting it. No problem whatsoever. But to put small lots next to 1 acre lots, I have a bit of a problem. And when Chris said, I think it's a beautiful project. I think it looks really nice. But when Chris said that it offers a variety of housing options, I think it offers a variety of housing styles and housing floor plans, but they're basically all in the same house. And I think when I think housing options, I think of different housing sizes and housing prices, not just the same house at the same price point. And I think that's what we need in Douglas County. We don't need more of expensive single-family homes. We need more starter homes, more duplex types homes. We need a variety of housing types. And as far as the housing or the traffic assessments, hopefully when NDOT makes assessments for 395, they don't spend it outside of our area. And as long as it sits in the fund, it's gaining interest, and they will spend it for 395, although I do believe that it's not enough money to make much of a difference. And the same goes for Douglas County, that it's sitting in a fund that will be spent for the areas where it is designated and not get put away, although I know that Terry Willoughby had a lot of special accounts for our areas. She did a wonderful job, and we're going to miss her terribly. But I know that in community development, Tom Delaire is very good about keeping an eye on all the pots, and that Gardnerville and the Ranchos will get the improvements that they need as they come forward and we have the money. And let's see, I don't have any other comments other than it's probably obvious that I can't support this, even though it is a lovely project. But in looking over, the finding that I disagree with is finding A, and it's mostly because of Land Use Policy 22, which says maintain community plans and regions to establish the policies necessary to reflect and enhance each community's desired character. And I think the character in this area is very rural. And this neighborhood, while it is lovely, is out of place for this area. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Maureen. Chris, I think unless you have something critical, we'd like to kind of bring this to a conclusion here. I know Bryce had some comments, and I'd like to tell the Planning Commission members we need to look at the recommended motion. The recommended motion is on page 55. The required findings start on page 63. They include findings for the zoning map amendment and for the planned development and for the tentative subdivision map. So those, as we deliberate, those would be ones where you could focus any comments on, as Maureen just did, on the specific findings that you believe are important. Was there something small that you had to throw in there, Chris?
Yeah, I was just looking for a little clarity from Commissioner Casey's comment on you were talking about feathering. So are you talking about matching the lot? So the other option of matching versus buffering?
Feathering to me is having larger lot sizes as you go out.
Okay. So, okay. As opposed to solving the hydrology concern. So
Yes.
that was where, so in this case, we're in a situation where we have an existing flooding issue and we're trying to balance both, right? So solve a flooding issue that's there, and ensure to protect the adjacent neighbors as best as possible and meet the setbacks in the, so we're trying to balance kind of two things as opposed to just putting half-acre lots adjacent to half-acre lots and then perpetuating a current flooding issue. So that's the basis for what we did and why we're doing it this way.
Yeah, I understand
Thank
what you did, but I like feathering, that it goes out, that the lot sizes get bigger as they go out from the project.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Maureen. Bryce?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make it quick because I know we're trying to put a bow on this. Although I have a tremendous amount of respect for my colleague, Ms. Casey, I think it's important to recognize that we cannot solve all problems that exist here. That the current zoning is 8,000, and I think the applicant has done an admirable job of trying to address hydrology, trying to address traffic, trying to address compatibility. They have a right to develop this property, and I think they've tried to take into consideration everything they can to develop the property in a respectful and mindful manner. As it pertains to affordability, if these lot sizes were larger, they would be more expensive, and so those houses and those lots would be more expensive. So they wouldn't offer, more affordable housing in our community. And when it comes to affordable housing, I think we all understand that that's a challenge, but really that's a function of the market. And barring any subsidies for the developer, there's just no way economically that you can address affordability, if you will, based on land costs and conditions and all the other things that go into it. And I know that I'll hear from members of the public that I'm pro-development, and I think the record will show that that's not the case. What I'm pro is following the master plan and following Title 20. And I think that this particular application does not deviate from the master plan, that it does meet the findings. And although it doesn't solve every problem, I will reiterate that I think it has solved a number of problems that do exist. And so for that reason, I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Bryce. Paul?
I am consistent, my thinking is consistent with Maureen's, because I can foresee, they're not mutually exclusive, that you have less density and then you also will defeat the hydrology benefits that are being attempted by the developer as described by the developer's agent. You can have that buffer at the north end. You can make those trenches and ponds a little larger. You can have larger lots on that end and as it faces slightly to the west and east, and you can put a much more dense product towards the center of the project, and that would satisfy all of the competing characteristics and desires, and yet also satisfy the compatibility with the surrounding neighborhoods issue, which I think is critical after hearing all of the testimony on the 12th, and I just had gone over it in addition to what we've discussed here today. So I cannot support the project as it currently exists either.
Paul, do you want to cite specific findings at this point, or do you want to wait for the motion and then cite what findings you believe can't be met?
Largely, I'm depending upon finding C, that can't be met, but could be met, as well as the hydrological issue.
Thank you, Paul. I think we can have a motion now, and then if we need to have further discussion, or we can take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to make a motion. I recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners of the following: Plan Development PD Tentative Subdivision Map, TSM Application DP 23-0090, requesting to A, reestablish a PD overlay zone for a 33.20 acre residential subdivision site, allowing for the reduction in lot size, width, and setbacks, and B, subdivide 33.20 acres into 85 single-family residential lots, the smallest being 8,000 square feet, with 7.86 acres of open space, and 2, zoning map amendment ZMA application DP 23-0091, requesting to change the zoning designation from SFR 8,000 to SFR 12,000 because all the required findings have been met, subject to any applicable conditions.
Thank you, Bryce. Is there a second?
Second.
Mark seconds the motion. I'll take this as a roll call vote, and then we'll conclude this agenda item. Paul?
I'm voting no on the motion because I believe that there can be improvements that would both satisfy the current zoning, even though the tortured past has been discussed. Maureen's comments and my comments are consistent with modifying and altering the PD overlay such that all of the findings, including finding C, can be met. So I'm voting no.
Thank you, Maureen.
I'm voting no because I don't agree that it meets Land Use Policy 22.
Thank you, Maureen. Mark?
I believe it meets the findings, and I think the applicant has done his best to try and put a buffer zone to the north end of the property.
Thank you, Mark. Bryce?
I'm voting aye. I do too. I also believe it meets the findings, and I've already stated why.
Thank you, Bryce. I'm troubled by the findings for the zoning map amendment B in concern with the traffic, but I think we have given the applicant opportunity to make sure that we do not jeopardize the transportation impact of this project. I would also note that I do believe it's compatible with the master plan. This master plan amendment, I think, was probably more than 2 decades ago, and it has been designated as a receiving area for that period of time. So this is what the planners anticipated, and no changes have been brought forth on those issues. So I will be voting aye on this issue, and that would make 3 votes aye, 2 votes no, and the motion would be agreed to. I'm not sure if I see the individuals who are responsible for the next item, and as such, let's take a 10-minute break, Michelle, or would you like a 15-minute break? 10-minute break, and we'll come back at a few minutes before 3 o'clock. Thank you very much. I'll call the meeting back to order. Mark, if you can confirm that you're still able to hear us and we're able to hear you, and then I'll read the next item into the record.
Absolutely, can hear you well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We appreciate your indulgence and hope you feel better soon. Agenda item number 3 for possible action. Discussion on the following requests. Plan development tentative subdivision map application DP 23-0235 Buckeye Farm Neighborhood 1. Requesting to A, establish a PD overlay zone to include 89.39 acre single-family residential subdivision site and PF zoning for greenways and a park, and B, to subdivide 89.39 acres into 324 residential lots, the smallest being 8,000 square feet and a maximum of 16,822 square feet, and 12 public facility parcels that comprise 1.8 acres plus or minus of parks and 5.3 plus or minus acres of landscaped greenways. The subject parcels are located north of Buckeye Road, east of Minden Elementary School, in the A19 zoning district in the Town of Minden Community Plan. The property owner is Park Ranch Holdings LLC, represented by Keith Rubin, R.O. Anderson Engineering, APNs 1320-29-501-003, 1320-29601-003, 1320-28-000-04, and 1320-28-000-47. I'd like to note for the record, for the public in attendance and watching, that we did receive from Community Development a large packet of additional conditions of approval that were not in the original package or supplemental materials, and that was also made available to the applicant this morning. And then we did receive, just before the meeting, a large packet entitled Buckeye Farms Draft Traffic Analysis done by, prepared for R.O. Anderson, dated December 2023, and this was done by Somas. And that was given to us and before the meeting. So with those two announcements, we'll move to the staff explanation of this project, and then we'll turn to the applicant for their comments, and then we'll consider public comment and deliberate on the proposal. Kate?
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
I have a
Maureen.
question. Since we received this traffic analysis at the beginning of our meeting, I have not looked at this at all, and I want to know if our staff had a chance to look at this.
I believe the staff received it at about approximately the same time we did, and I'm not sure if they've had any cursory review or would like to comment at this point.
Good afternoon. No, but Kate Morales O'Neill, Planning Manager. No, we have not had an opportunity to review the updated traffic analysis.
Are we
As far as we know, we haven't seen it, so I don't believe that we've been able to review it.
Are we under any obligation to accept it?
Go ahead, Tom or AJ.
Tom Delaire for the record. We have conditioned the items that we were looking for out of the traffic analysis. Maureen, that's in our list of conditions that you received this afternoon. So we can review this traffic analysis against those conditions and see if it's applicable and then mark them off if it is. I mean, we tried to get all the conditions that we needed or that staff felt we needed to have for this project to get to the approval part.
Thank you, Tom.
Last comment, I just wanted on the record that I am very unhappy that the Planning Commission has not had a chance to review this. This has happened before, and I'm just very displeased that it's so unprofessional that Planning Commission, who's supposed to be reviewing this project, is unable to do a complete job.
Thank you, Maureen. Kate, if you would like to kick it off, we'll go from there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you again. First and foremost, happy and healthy New Year to all of you and everyone in attendance today. Congratulations to Chairman Walder and Vice Chairman Klutz on your nominations, and for all of you for your dedication day in and day out. This, we are recommending approval with a lot of conditions. We do apologize up front. This has been a very difficult review. We did attempt in mid-December, I think it was the 18th, we were hoping to continue the item to try to get us all on the same page. We felt that there were things that still needed to be submitted with the application based on the general provisions in the approved specific plan. And again, I want to acknowledge it does come down to interpretation of code and of many things. So what I don't want this to turn into is pointing fingers or let's try to avoid being contentious, because the whole goal is we want to get on the same page and we want to try to move projects forward. And staff was just in a position that if we couldn't continue it, we had what we had in front of us. We spent many, many hours, and again, we apologize. The conditions came much later than we anticipated, but the timing too of the applications and some of the resubmittals that came in late in December with the holidays, vacations, needing to meet with legal, it just, what was up against us was against us. So we have done our best, and we're hoping that we can find some type of resolution today. So we're going to start first just to kind of do an overview. And then Keith Rubin is here, and he will also be doing a presentation following this. And of course, we'll be here for questions. Thank you.
Tom Dallaire for the record, Community Development Director. So we received on November 27th, and I believe they submitted it earlier, right before Thanksgiving, but staff received it on the 27th. And we received a plan development overlay requesting the SFR 8,000 zoning, similar to what we just heard before, so 8,000 square foot lots. It would be a PD. We received a tentative map showing 324 single-family residential units, and we also received an application for an amendment number 2 to Buckeye Farm specific plan. These are minor modifications that we have some comments on a couple of the general provisions, but we analyzed this based on the number, the current amendment number 1. We have not yet received a boundary line adjustment application. There's a zoning for the parcels, which then creates the project site in the phases, that creates the parcels for the phases that are being proposed. And then there's a zoning map amendment to change the base zoning from A19 to the SFR 8,000 PD. We also, per the specific plan, needed a Water Conveyance Advisory Committee for the tentative subdivision map, and then NDOT approval of the traffic impact study or analysis that we haven't seen. We've seen letters from NDOT, but it just says that they want to review those at each phase. So they need to review that document as well. The how do you get this thing to? There we go. Also, there are many notes in the specific plan relating to the concept and the minimum design standards. So this one I put ahead of the next two. So you'll see the road sections that are being proposed are meeting our design standards, and they do that. It's a 16-foot lane from the center line to the lip of the gutter, 2 foot for the curb and gutter, and then a 5-foot sidewalk, which is attached. That is the local road section. What you see in the specific plan is the local roads are a 12-foot lane with an 8-foot parking with the curb, and then a 5-foot landscaping with a 5-foot sidewalk, all within the 60. And this one's in the 60-foot right of way. So it basically reduces the amount of pavement at that section down 5 feet total width, face to face a curb. And then we didn't see any of the landscape planter islands located on the plan either. So just to keep in mind, the right of way that is proposed is 60 foot, but the cross sections, the improvements within those right-of-ways is what varies on what was submitted versus what was in the specific plan. And I have page numbers here on each of the slides for your reference, so hopefully everybody can follow along with this. The local street number 2 is the 50-foot right-of-way, and a similar thing, I believe this is a rolled curb. It is a little bit different shape than what the other curb showed as an L-type curb where there will be a 6-inch face, but virtually it's the same issue. We have 2 feet behind the sidewalk to the right-of-way. That's a 4 foot of the full width section, and then usually I think the specific plan shows all the dimensions to the face of curb. So there's a difference there. So basically the streets that are out there, you could park on one side of the road but not on both and still get by with a trash truck or emergency vehicle. Also, there's notes in the specific plan that are, this is a proposed graphics and are described to describe the general character of the right-of-way. The final right-of-way design would meet or to comply with the minimum design standards by Douglas County. So the minimum design standards in Douglas County, I believe, is a 10-foot wide pathway. They're showing an 80-foot wide right-of-way here and a 100-foot right-of-way for those types of trails that are throughout the entire development, not just this one neighborhood, but all the developments in the specific plan. But we just wanted to bring that to your attention as you review this. And then the overall plan, this is a parcel layout concept, Buckeye Farms. And on the right-hand side of this map, this is page 32 of the specific plan, your supplemental page, page 66. The specific plan was added to supplemental, I believe, last week, earlier. I don't remember when. It's been a whirlwind. But there is a disclaimer at the bottom of this. The plans and diagrams in Buckeye Farms Conservation Community Vision Plan are conceptual. The areas, parcels layout, and road layout are approximate. But we do have on the right-hand side here, is that pointer working? Yeah, right here. The single-family front-loaded parcels, there's a list of sizes of parcels, and there's 1,600 and, I got a window, 1,632 lots that were proposed in the entire development. And then there were single-family alley-loaded. So these are alley-loaded parcels. There are 360 lots that were contemplated, and multifamily at 136 lots, and then mixed-use commercial units. So you had live-work situations where there would be commercial down below and probably residents up above, or a combination thereof, 100 of those units. And in this project, what's being proposed is strictly single-family. So this is the blow-up of Neighborhood 1, and with the amendment that they proposed along with these applications, it was putting the phasing in the correct order, which is a minor amendment, and at the staff level could be approved. I think for development-wise, it makes sense now that the county has purchased the property to the north from Park Ranch Holdings. That's the location for the judicial center, and that'll be up here, located off of Buckeye. And so this section is what was contemplated and proposed, where majority of the units were going to be single family, and then they had the alley loaded and the multi-family units here. And then what you see on the left is what the subdivision that they're proposing. They do have the connections going to the Montera subdivision. This is the Minden Elementary School right down here. And this would be the open field with a large basin located in it for storm drainage collection and release. And there is some irrigation infrastructure already in place that will discharge the stormwater north past Montera and onto the river from there. The phasing of the plan development, we have a plan development boundary here that's being proposed. You can see there's 5 phases. The plan development isn't including the property where the ag area was. So we weren't positive as to when those areas were going to be dedicated as open space and I think what they had mentioned in their plan. So hopefully they'll cover that section. But basically staff was looking for some direction on which phase these improvements are going to be located. Also, they propose a roundabout as a connection. I believe that was based on the recommendation of the traffic analysis that was done. We do have a roundabout just due west of this site at Hayborn and Buckeye as well. And we do have some sidewalk here that staff feels that needs to be connected to that roundabout, at least if we're going to have some pedestrian crossing at that location. They're proposing the 5 phases, 103 lots in the first phase, 57 lots in phase 2, 56 lots in phase 3, 57 lots in phase 4, and 51 lots in phase 5. And they were going to be, they wanted to have those recorded by December 31st, 2040, so all phases. There is some provisions in the development agreement and also in the staff report that staff has added when the final maps are recorded, and we'd like to work these details out with the applicant, but we had chose just based on what staff felt the development agreement stated was that we would need the phase 1 to be recorded by December 31st, 2026, phase 2 recorded by December 31st, 2029, 3 at 2032. Phase 4 would be recorded at 2035, and phase 5 recorded by December 31st of 2038. And the entire project completed by 2040. So we can turn the time over to the applicant to give you the rest of the details on the development, and then we'd be available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Tom. Kate, did you have anything to add, or I prefer to move to the applicant before we have questions from the Planning Commission, and then we can ask the questions of both the staff and the applicant? Okay. Thank you very much, Tom. And Keith, would you like to begin the presentation on your end?
Reuben, R.O. Anderson Engineering, representing the applicant, Park Cattle. I have with me in the audience David Park and Garrett Gordon, his attorney. Garrett will be following me up after my technical presentation. So. All right, thank you, Tom. Yeah, it's working. Okay, Buckeye Farm Plan Development Number 1. We're all good?
You want me to turn the pointer on?
Oh, yes, please.
I had it turned on the last one.
Thank you. Awesome. It's working even better than ever. Okay, Plan Development Zoning Overlay, SFR-PD and PFPD. Now I clicked it and it doesn't go. I think you can't have the pointer on probably, it seemed. Oh, there we go, okay. Tentative subdivision map, and click it again, and a minor modification specific plan. All of these were provided at the application submittal back on November 27th, 2023, when the application was deemed complete. Background agreements, I wanted to give everybody just a background of the agreements that were in place and for the review of this plan development. In 2005, the owner in Douglas County entered into a development agreement for Park to dedicate right-of-way 105 feet in width across Park Ranch lands to Douglas County for Muller Parkway, and provided up to 7 years for Douglas County to construct the road. In 2007, Douglas County approved the First Amendment to the Development Agreement, revising the alignment and changing the width to the previously dedicated right-of-way to 150 feet. And in 2019, with the road not constructed and recognizing changed conditions per the agreement itself, Douglas County approved the second and current amendment to the development agreement. And with respect to Muller Parkway, this amendment was revised with a width of 205 feet and a revised alignment. The second amendment to the development agreement vests 2,500 development rights for single-family residential zoning to Park Cattle Company, Section 7.1 of the agreement, and this also included the Ashland Park subdivision as well. In general, the agreement requires Park Cattle Company to dedicate the right-of-way for Muller Parkway, along with other considerations from Park, and the county is obligated to construct Muller Parkway 2 lanes along with 7 points of access from Toller-Muller intersection north to the Hayborn-Muller intersection by December of 2025. With the approval of this agreement in December of 2019, Park Cattle submitted a specific plan for the area subject to this agreement, which was approved by Douglas County in December of 2020. This is an overview, high-level overview of the plan. It included 1,044 acres, 597 acres of housing, trails, parks, 105 acres of dedicated farm areas, 57 acres, which was also a separate standalone farm at beginning, but morphed into the Douglas County parcel that they ended up acquiring last year, and 285 acres of native pasture. In exchange for this, and to implement it, there's going to be conservation easements over approximately 9,000 acres, TDRs, most of which are located in South Douglas County. Some also came from the Clobber Ranch, which has already been deed restricted for the 115 acres, and those TDRs have been certified. Overview of the units, we've got a total of 2,218 units within the confines of the specific plan itself. There are 136 multifamily units and 100 units of MFR/mixed-use commercial zoning, all of which is located on the south side. The MFR mixed-use commercial is located on the south side of Buckeye Road. This is kind of an overview of that. It's looking north, and there's where I'll use my pointer. So Buckeye Road's here. Hayborn Meadows generally in this area right here. And this is Chichester over here. Muller Parkway alignment, I think, comes generally in this direction, right, Tom? Comes around and comes out, comes in right through here, which is where, right there. And this is Win Haven. Okay, go to the next slide, please. This is the land use concept plan. This shows the neighborhoods, and this, we didn't change the neighborhood numbering. This was neighborhood 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Next slide, please. Here's the phasing conditions. Basically, one says that, because we didn't exactly know when we started which phase would go first, although we did number them. And we said, here's what we think it's going to go, but notwithstanding that, sequencing of the 5 proposed neighborhoods may occur independently subject to review and approval of the plan development application subject to the availability and accessibility of adequate public facilities for each proposed neighborhood. The next slide, next page. Okay, subsequent plan development approvals, which is what we're talking about today, for each of the proposed 5 residential neighborhoods identified in this specific plan shall allow all subphases to be recorded by a date certain, concurrent with the time frame set forth for recording the last subphase of that plan development. So I guess that's why I would object to the condition that was paused by staff. We did try to do that. Maybe we could maybe argue about if it should be 2040 or 2036, but it was that we wouldn't have to come back and keep repeating this exercise every 2 or 3 years. And if there's a problem, have to ask for an extension. This is the phasing plan concept that was originally provided, just so everybody is clear. This phase R1 was intended to be phase 1, 2, then jumped over to 3, then came over to 4, and then went to 5. And now we've just made it in order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, according to the neighborhood numbering order. And this is what shows that. And then the approximate unit count for each phase, and it says approximate, but it says 324, and that's what's being proposed today, 324. And it goes on for the approximate unit count for each phase. Here's the public facility parcel that Douglas County purchased. This is, just for getting orientation, this is Buckeye Road, future molar alignment, and this is the Montera subdivision, elementary schools like right here. Okay, so there's 324 lots, 8,000 square feet minimum size, 12 public facility parcels that comprise 1.8 acres of parks and 5.3 acres of landscape greenways, including 4,000 linear feet of the ag meander path. We must transfer 320 TDRs to record all the subphases of this proposed plan development. The proposed zoning includes SFR 8000 PD for the residential lots and PF PD for the greenways and parks. Maximum building height is for the SFR standards for 8,000, 35 feet height, and setbacks are standard setbacks for 8,000 square foot lots. Since all the parcels are 8,000 square feet and greater in size, separate RV parking facilities are not required. This is a copy of the tentative map that shows the PD boundaries. Go to the next slide, please. This is the phasing plan, which they showed you earlier. And this is the illustrative development plan that was included. And I guess I wanted to point out a couple things. The specific plan is a high-level document. It's a planning document. It's not an engineering document per se. It's provided to give a concept of what the developer's intending. So this diagram shows what we proposed, and in where you see the colored trees, those are streets that are 60 feet wide and have the planted parkways. So you have the sidewalk, the parkways, and then the street meeting Douglas County standards. So I wanted to kind of show that to you, as well as the trail we're talking about. This ag meander path trail that was in the specific plan starts here, comes up to here, comes all the way around, comes back to here, and then there is a extension of the Buckeye multi-use path that terminates right here today. This will be continued on this side of Buckeye Road. This ag meander path ultimately goes through the entire development on this side and also on the south side of Buckeye Road. Go ahead, Tom. So there's a couple disclaimers which Tom referenced. One is that these plans are conceptual. In fact, most of the plans do say conceptual. The areas layout and road layout are approximate. And also regarding the graphics for the right-of-way, that these would need to comply with Douglas County standards. These were notations made by the developer and submitted to the county. Development agreement, just so everybody knows, for further county approvals, basically says that that the development agreement shall be deemed sufficient to support the necessary findings for approval zoning map amendment application for single-family residential zoning. I think that's an important point because when we're reviewing the specific plan and we're reviewing what the standards are in the development agreement, sometimes they're not always jiving. So we did have this in there. Wanted to note that. This is the illustrative plan that was in the specific plan. So the way it works is there's a designer for this project. He was out of Georgia. He did an illustrative plan that showed the concepts and layout of the subdivision. Then this was transmuted by an architect he worked with back east that showed a little more, just showed this in more of an AutoCAD detail, I would say. But you can see it doesn't really show much in land use. It just has some concepts. You can go to the next slide, Tom. This is the parcel layout concept that was referred to earlier. And this is where neighborhood 1 is and where we're discussing this today. It doesn't show any of the road connections. That was actually a condition of approval of the specific plan. So one of the points of doing the modifications to show those changes moving forward. So everybody in the future knows what had happened. And this plan doesn't show any of those road connections. This is just a kind of a side-by-side comparison of the illustrative plan and the lot plan. And you see they're different. This shows a park adjacent to what is now the county parcel. This one shows one more oriented towards the center. This one shows what appears to be multifamily, a center located greenway with houses that don't front on it, but actually are side kind of back, not even backing up, they're just kind of on the side of them. This shows a road that goes through it with what appears to be street trees. Next slide. This shows the open space concept. This shows a park in this area, but nothing over here. And shows no road connections and shows this, again, this is the architect's drawing, shows the greenway. This is the right-of-way that Tom was talking about. This shows just in both plan and profile, so to speak, the chicanes in the middle, the two 12-foot travel lanes, and then parking on the other side. This is then shows more of the cross-section. Here's the medians for the 60-foot right-of-way, the sidewalk, parking, travel lanes, all of that adds up to 60 feet. 50-foot, same thing, except smaller and really no parkways. Otherwise, it's the same design. Yeah, just no medians. 50-foot right away. After the plan was submitted and the approval letter from Douglas County, they said that we had to use detail AO2. This is detail AO2, which is what we submitted with the PD. And it shows the county details. So we have been willing to cooperate however we can, but we felt we were moving forward with this as conditioned by staff. This shows the right-of-way plans. This is out of the specific plan. And you can't read it, but it breaks down the where the 60-foot road right-of-ways are located, where the minor and major collectors are. The only 60-foot roadway that's in the specific plan shown is through here on the south side of Buckeye Road. There's nothing notated in this neighborhood. And my point to all this is just to say there's a lot of, I would say, discretion and judgments that need to be made as to what complies with the plan and what doesn't as a planning document. When we submitted this, we intended to follow the standards, what was in the plan, particularly for roads. But again, when we got the approval letter, said use our details, so that's what we did. But we have gone, I would say, beyond the standards by showing the roads that we did show that are 60-foot with the planted landscaped parkways. The updated traffic study with corrections has been submitted to staff. I want to make sure it's clear that the study itself that was resubmitted today does not purport to change any of the technical requirements. It only updates the exhibit that was incorrect that showed the wrong vicinity map, and I think a couple of the typos, but that's all it does. The scope of the study complies with the county approval letter dated December 28th, 2020, and the development agreement. That is condition number 1 of the approval letter. Says that we study 3 intersections, not the litany of intersections that was requested by staff at the time, what I read in the staff report without conditions. So without the conditions, I haven't had time to review them. I don't know what it says, to be honest with you today. But this was what, when we scoped the study, this is what we utilized. And just as a point, just the minor modification again was a housekeeping measure. The plan itself, I would say, doesn't even really require it. It can be done administratively. Doesn't say we have to submit a minor modification, but having been involved in almost every specific plan that's ever been adopted in Douglas County in my career, it helps and should be maintained as you move forward, whatever decision you make, just so it informs other people in the future what was done. So that's why there's been 3 amendments in the Nevada Northwest specific plan. I'm sure I haven't been involved in all of them, but I'm sure there's been amendments to the ones in North Valley specific plan, major and minor. And so that's just a good thing to do in your specific plan, in your master plan, and in your development code in general moving forward. That concludes my presentation. I'm going to turn this over to Garrett.
Thank you very much, Keith.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead. If you could state your name for the record then.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Garrett Gordon. I'm a land use lawyer. Been doing this about 17 years up here in Northern Nevada, and it's a pleasure to be before you today on behalf of the applicant. Let me go back a couple months. So November 27th, this application was deemed approved. Obviously, a lot of time, money, and expense was put into that application and making sure it checked every single box in staff's mind that it was deemed approved. We waited for conditions of approval. Nothing came. Last week, we got the staff report, and we're satisfied. The staff report that came out and staff's analysis, if you walk through, starting on page 10, it walks through every single legal finding for a plan development and for a tentative map. It has the finding, it has the applicant's response, and then it has staff affirms this finding has been met. Number 2, staff affirm this finding has been met. 3, staff affirms this finding has been met. So in our minds, all the findings had been met. And why was that? Because a lot of time and expense had been put into, 1, the development agreement, which, as mentioned earlier, and if you look on the beginning pages, it defines what a vested right is. And the development agreement gives an irrevocable right to develop 2,500 units on this property, along with the specific plan and the analysis that our planner did, along with all the time and effort and negotiation that was put into the specific plan in order to move forward with a tentative map. As you know, you start with a land use plan, zoning, development agreements. Finally, you get a tentative map, and so long as it's in conformance with those documents, and not only a random Douglas County Code document, but a specific plan that was negotiated between the county and Mr. Park. Every provision in there has a reason for why we're here today. And so we move forward to, about 2 hours ago, we get a list of conditions of approval. And those conditions of approval were over 30 pages long and address many provisions in the specific plan that we absolutely disagree with how they're interpreted. You can see, for example, on the conditions of approval, it talks about we need to redo the tentative map because it doesn't have multifamily, or redo the tentative map because rather than 1 park, we split it in 2 parks. Well, Mr. Park negotiated in our specific plan some specific provisions. For example, a condition of approval in the specific plan, number 23, modifications to the phasing plan can be handled through the tentative map process. Again, we have a tentative map, we have a phase, we know we have to do multifamily, we know we have to do a certain number of units. There's no requirement that those units have to be put on this specific phase. They can go anywhere within the handbook. Another specific provision that's in the conditions of approval, again, are you have to phase in multifamily here, or you have to do this neighborhood center here. Right here in the specific plan that was negotiated by Mr. Park and the county, changes to proposed phasing may occur without a specific plan amendment, provided overall development is consistent with the policies. Again, exactly what we're doing is consistent with the policies. And why is that? Well, you look at the map that was shown earlier about the phasing. And it says here, plans and diagrams are conceptual only. And you can see there's a table list how many multifamily units have to be developed in this area of the overall plan. We will absolutely comply with that between now and the end of the development. But there's no requirement to do multifamily in this first phase. There's no requirement to have 1 park, rather 2 parks with the same acreage, even more acreage, right? You do these specific plans to have flexibility and have interpretation that's in there to allow the applicant to move forward with the development based on its development agreement. And so we certainly have concerns with all of the conditions of approval that we got, again, about a couple hours ago, trying to figure out how to move this forward. So now we're in a dilemma. We have a specific plan that Mr. Park spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on and negotiated with the county, which we're now thinking, well, what did the developer get out of it? We can't think of one thing. We have 2,500 units that are guaranteed, vested in the development agreement. The specific plan has a lot of great things, trails, infrastructure, et cetera. But the fact that now the provisions we put in there to give us the flexibility are being used against us, we don't know why we have a specific plan at all. So, Mr. Chairman and Commission, I think we're left with two options today, at least in our mind, when we're looking for a motion from this body. The first one would be you approve the tentative map and the PD overlay that's been submitted with the conditions of approval that are threefold. One, the conditions that are currently in our specific plan, the general provisions. Two, when our specific plan was approved, there was a conditions of approval letter. Absolutely, we'll comply with each and every one of those as well. So it would be the conditions of approval in the specific plan final action letter. And number three, we have the Gardnerville letter of approval. We have approval from the town of Gardnerville. There is a list of conditions, and we absolutely will agree to all of those conditions. So we have an application before you. We'll agree with all the conditions in specific plan as it sits before you, all the conditions on the final action letter specific plan, and the Gardnerville conditions of approval. But that's it. Not the conditions that were sprung upon us about 2 hours ago that require zoning plan amendments, that require changes to our tentative map because we disagree on interpretation of specific plan. That is not fair or equitable or why we spent time and money on a specific plan that helps this community. So that's option one. We would ask a motion to approve it with those three those three documents that have conditions of approval, and we move forward. Alternatively, we're prepared to repeal or rescind our specific plan today. We don't know what benefit at all it's giving this project. And if we, unfortunately, after spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and hours and hours and hours of negotiations on a specific plan with staff, and the language we used in there to give us flexibility on phasing is now being used against us, we don't know why we need it. So we would ask for a motion today that the applicant agrees to repeal the specific plan. And where does that leave us, you ask? Well, you go back to the conditions you go back to the required findings, and the required findings in their development agreement are from code in 2019. And staff says we can meet all the findings subject to the conditions of approval. You look at the conditions of approval we got 2 hours ago, and they all deal with specific plan interpretations. And if some of them don't, we'll comply with them. So my option B would be a motion to approve. We'll rescind the specific plan. You pull out all conditions of approval that relate to the specific plan, and we'll comply with whatever's left over. So we have straight zoning, we have conditions that deal with straight zoning, and we can move forward without the specific plan because it's being used against us in our minds. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for letting me probably go a little longer than normal, Mr. Chairman. It's kind of a unique circumstance of getting conditions within the last couple hours, but we're all here for questions and appreciate your time again.
Thank you very much. Before I yield to my colleague for questions, just a quick observation. And I know my colleagues are very independent-minded and very studious in their review of materials, but I think in some ways, it's kind of like the movie Cool Hand Luke. I think what we have here is a little bit of a failure to communicate, and I hope we can work past that, if not today, then in the future. But I'll yield to my colleagues for questions, and if we can try and avoid to have a back and forth Lincoln Douglas debate between the staff and the applicant, I would ask my fellow commissioners to ask their pointed questions either for the staff or the applicant. If they need to have clarifications from both, then we can entertain that. But I would hope that we don't have extensive back and forth on things that we can resolve fairly quickly. Kate, if you would like to add something now before I turn it over to the Planning Commission.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Walder. Kate Morales, O'Neill Planning Manager. I just want to clarify a statement that was made. When an application is submitted, the community development per code has 3 days to review the application to determine if it's complete, not approved. That's a huge difference. So what that means is within 3 days, we have 3 days to see are the documents that are required for this application here? Are all the documents submitted? It doesn't mean we review all the documents to determine if they're accurate or so. I just wanted to make sure we're using the word complete versus approved. As far as the zoning map amendment application, that was not submitted. I will let our esteemed AJ Hames clarify. My interpretation is that zoning map amendment is required, and that's why it is one of the conditions. When you have base zoning, which is A19, the zoning map amendment establishes the development standards. So this would be SFR 8000 and establishes the setbacks and so forth. A PD overlay allows you to expand or increase the density of that zoning and adjust setbacks and so forth. So it is my understanding and my long hours of looking at the code that I do not see, and AJ can elaborate on this, that it is not needed, was needed with this application. So that is something that we went back and forth on. And again, as far as the timing of this, we had resubmittals in late January or December 22nd, right before the holidays. So it's obvious why these conditions took a long time in trying to, gather the right documents and determine, where to go from there. So I just wanted to clarify those two things.
Thank you very much, Kate. That was your excellent clarifications, and I had written that down as well. There's a difference between deemed complete and approved. AJ, anything that you wanted to add, or did Kate summarize things fairly well?
AJ Hames from the District Attorney's Office. No, Kate pretty much summed it up. Basically, the PD is supposed to be, it's supposed to make things easier. I don't know if it does, but it's supposed to be a mechanism for combining various applications and approvals into one sort of grand application. And there are bits and pieces of that. An example is what was just heard, of course, by the commission, the Ranchos development. That PD included numerous applications, one of which was for the PD overlay. The other was for a change to the base zoning. That was the zoning map amendment application. And then the third portion of that PD application was for the tentative subdivision map, which accomplished the land division. So in this case, the application was submitted and some reference was made to SFR 8000, or SFR 5000? 8,000. 8,000, okay. But the actual zoning map amendment application was not completed, and so those findings specific to that were not addressed. So in this, in preparation for this meeting, when noticing went out, it noted the applications that had been completed, which were the tentative subdivision map application and the application for the PD overlay. Since there wasn't an application for a zoning map amendment, that wasn't noticed. So it's the county's position that that specific application would need to be completed and those findings addressed, and then ultimately heard by this board. It creates a little bit of a procedural issue because here we are now hearing the PD overlay application and a tentative subdivision map, which if approved, absent a zoning map amendment, would ultimately result in land that's zoned A19 having a residential subdivision placed on top of it. And so the PD overlay zone is supposed to be accompanied by that zoning map amendment. You can still achieve that if the board were to approve the application today. Then what would happen is the PD overlay and the tentative map would go to the Board of County Commissioners for a first reading. This board would then hear in its February meeting the application for the zoning map amendment, which would then be added to the ordinance that would be presented to the Board of County Commissioners in their subsequent meeting. But anyway, it's a long explanation, but yeah, code requires that all relevant applications, when you're applying for a PD, all those applications are to be submitted together, processed together. In this case, one of those applications, the zoning map amendment, was not specifically included. And then the specific plan, in this case, also requires some additional applications, one of which, for example, is a boundary line adjustment. So right now, you've got a bunch of parcels that are ag land, and they are not parceled to match up with the phasing plan that you'll see in the specific plan. So in the specific plan, you have phases R1, R2, R3, et cetera. But those aren't parcels. And so one of the conditions in the specific plan was to apply for a boundary line adjustment so that the ag parcels match up with the phasing, so to speak, the neighborhoods. So if there's 5 neighborhoods, there should be 5 parcels in the shape of the future neighborhoods. So that was another application that was not submitted in accordance with the PD application. So those were some of the issues that staff had, was that they felt like there were certain applications that should have been submitted in conjunction with this PD overlay and tentative subdivision map application, and they were not submitted. And so that's why one of the conditions that they're adding or asking for are that those be submitted in the future.
Thank you very much, AJ. Very thorough explanation. I'll summarize it in 2 words. It's complicated. Kate, one more thing before we go to the Planning Commission.
Sorry, Kate Morales O'Neill, Planning Manager. Also, just to add more confusion or try to not have more confusion, the minor modifications to the specific plan that was referred to for the town of Gardnerville, that is not this application. So those were approved, and we haven't sent our approval letter for the modifications yet, but that is in the works. Tom is working on that now. So, and we looking at the modification that are parallel with this application, there's consistency there. So, but I did want to make sure that the minor modification application is a staff level application. It does not come to the Planning Commission or the board. So that reference of the approval of those was for that application, not this application. The town of Gardnerville does not hear this application.
Thank you very much, Kate. Planning Commission members, Maureen.
Ideally, the town of Minden would have heard this first.
Kate Morales, for the record, yes. Typically, their meeting would have been January 3rd. They did move the town of Minden. I think JD is here. If you have any questions for JD, it did move to January 10th, so they'll be hearing it tomorrow.
Mr. Chair, could we hear from JD Frisbee?
Yes, JD, rather than having you wait till public comment, I'd be happy to entertain some preliminary comments. And Maureen is exactly correct, and Kate is as well. I did talk to Larry Walsh, who's a member of the town board, and he said that because of the holidays and their meeting was originally scheduled on the 3rd, they elected to postpone until the 10th. And that is out of sequence, so it does provide us with a lack of information that we'd always like to receive from the towns when they have a lot of jurisdiction over this. So JD, please provide the explanation that you'd like to have the Planning Commission hear at this point.
Yeah, I mean, just to answer the question that's on the table, I think Larry did a good job of summing it up to you. We had a few board members that were gone last week because of the holidays, and so they asked for us to move it back. We obviously, at the time when we made that decision, did not know that there was an item of this magnitude coming down the pipe. But at the end of the day, the way the code's written, it doesn't matter who hears it first. We are both advisory to the Board of County Commissioners. And so with that said, county staff and myself had no issues with us hearing it after. For once, we actually get to hear what you guys have to say before. But at the end of the day, that's what the reason why we moved it back. It had nothing to do with this project in particular.
Thank you, JD. Planning Commission members that have questions for the staff or the applicant. Mark, do you want to jump in first so I don't forget you? Or would you prefer to go later on?
I can go now. I guess we seem to have a stalemate here. Most of the time when there are conditions of approval, I would have expected staff and the applicant to get together and say, hey, yeah, this was fine. This one we have a misunderstanding about. And this one we think really has significance, and we want to make sure that the Planning Commission understands this one. I don't get the anticipation that that's actually happening, that this is kind of a all or nothing right now. Am I correct? And that's a question to the applicant, I guess.
For the record, Garrett Gordon, thank you for the question, Commissioner. Yes, we are requesting that you make a motion and move forward today, whichever way that is. Hopefully it's one of my two options. The reason why, for the urgency, the anticipation, we're under contract with the builder. We need to move forward with those timelines and deadlines. And so we need to hopefully get a recognition of approval today and move forward to the board in a timely fashion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Other questions from members of the Planning Commission? Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The relationship with the town of Minden, I guess this is for council. You indicated that there has been approval of the findings by the town of Minden. I apologize, I'm just asking to clarify because I need to disclose that I looked on the internet, and in the town of Minden, it has a hyperlink to a matter that will be heard tomorrow, which is this project. And within that report, it's on the tentative map as well as the planned unit development, and the finding was, or the conclusion was, it did not meet each of the requirements specified in the county code, our code, for the findings stated above. And so it denied compliance with the findings, at least, and I don't understand the discrepancy of what I read on the internet. Of course, can't believe everything you see on the internet, right? But this, I think, is simply the agenda and the packet. So if you could clarify for me.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Commissioner. My comment earlier was that we have a letter from the Gardnerville.
Sorry,
town.
Gardnerville, not Minden.
No,
I apologize.
Gardnerville, that has some conditions of approval that we're saying we agree with and will be willing to live with if approved. We acknowledge we have to go to the town of Minden tomorrow.
And the town of Minden has substantial jurisdiction over, based upon their city limits, parts of this project.
As you heard, again for the record, Garrett Gordon, as you heard earlier, their advisory to provide, of course,
understand,
valuable.
Just this panel is also
Sure. Valuable input. It's my understanding that, again, their concern relates to the language in the specific plan. And that's why we're kind of calling that document into question now of whether we even need that. And maybe we'll just rescind it and move forward because we think we squarely fall under the findings necessary in Douglas County Code.
Understood. You're but you're suggesting a completely different approach to truncate all of this, including our review of the findings that we just received today. By the way, we didn't receive them before you did. And allow you to bypass this and Minden's if we followed your suggestion.
If you follow our suggestion, I guess, of option B, to repeal the specific plan and move forward with the findings, including the conditions of approval that are not applicable to the specific plan, which seems like a lot of them are, so we'd be left with probably some boilerplate ones that you would put on any, tentative map. I would still commit to you to go get input from Minden tomorrow, given we're on their agenda. I want to be a good community partner, but you're right, it would change things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Other questions from Planning Commission members? I have two kind of general lines of questioning that I'd like to ask the applicant and the staff. First of all, Keith, maybe you can address this. What I found important, I really liked this project when it was first brought forward. It was
exciting. It was something that the town of Minden and the county of Douglas County could be very proud of. It was thoughtful. It was something that I thought was negotiated very well. The development agreement was complicated. We had our ups and downs. I'm maybe the only member of the Planning Commission that was on the Planning Commission at the time, but I thought it was superb. I was very proud of what the applicant put forward. I was very proud of the work that the consultant did and that you did, Keith, at R.O. Anderson. One of the things I want to specifically mention is you talked to, I think Garrett Gordon talked about the number of general provisions in the development agreement, but number 31 was important to me. The developer will reserve a multifamily site in Phase R1 for the future development of at least 50 units of affordable housing as defined in Douglas County Code. Now, I understand you changed the phasing. I think there's a lot of logic to why you changed the phasing and what you've done. I'm very pleased that it was a successful agreement between Douglas County and Buckeye Farms for the judicial facility. That just pleased me tremendously. But when things are changed in a manner that kind of moves off the table for the immediate future of something that admittedly was number 31 on the list of 32 provisions, but could you just address that, either one of you, as to how we can maybe come to some sort of a compromise down the road on doing something other than what appears to me is just kind of a cookie cutter plan for a lot of lots?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question, and I think you make a very good point in regards to that number 31, because first of all, the phase we're talking about tonight is R3. And so our number 31, R1, we are absolutely required, bound to do 50 affordable units in R1. I could not show up to this body with a tentative map and not have a multifamily or affordable in R1, or else you would say, I don't comply with 31. The issue before us is staff's interpretation is because on a conceptual diagram, there shows a little brown area for multifamily, that we're bound to do multifamily in that phase 1 versus it's just a conceptual map. I would, to make your point, if there was a number 32 that said 20 multifamily units have to be put in R3 or phase 1, again, I'd be standing before you showing 20 multifamily units. It's just not a requirement. So we have this an interpretation issue, which we thought we did a good job, apparently we didn't, in the plan saying this is conceptual, you can change phasing with a tentative map, you have a right to do a minor modification for phasing, and all of a sudden we're getting, you gotta change your map, you gotta do a major modification, and let me just note, one of the conditions of approval in here is to do the boundary line adjustment. The boundary line adjustment requirement is in the specific plan general provisions, not number 31, but I think it's number 8, I want to say. So my suggestion to you is if you make us comply with the specific plan general provisions, we have to do the BLA anyway. So I'm not trying to get out of that requirement. It's already embedded. At least we thought about that early on. So I hope that gives us a little context of why we're here. We're not trying to get out of anything, just want the flexibility to sell some lots and continue to move forward with all those great things that you loved about the project.
Thank you very much. Let me move to the question that I had for staff. And I think the staff has worked extremely hard on this. Again, it's been over the holidays. People have been off, and it's always difficult to get all the staff pieces in place when things are submitted only on November 22nd, which doesn't seem like too long a time ago, and then other materials submitted on December 22nd. But my concern is we have so many conditions of approval. It's
it's going to result in a lot of future difficult discussions. I realize the staff is trying to do their job very thoroughly, dot all the i's, cross all the t's, protect the county in so many ways. And the same goes for the town of Minden. I'm very proud of the work that JD has done. It's only work by staff. It hasn't been approved by the town board, but I'm very pleased that he was so thoughtful in the materials that Paul and I read, and I believe Maureen read those as well. Other members may have read those to edify ourselves on this. But I'm just concerned that we're now, as I said before, a little bit at loggerheads, and I hope we don't have more difficult discussions in the future. I hope we can come together on what's best for the county. I believe that's what the county staff wants. I think that's what the applicants wants. And I just hope, pending the result of what we do, what the town of Minden does, and what the board does, that we can come together and not have a difficult set of negotiations that doesn't benefit anyone. So I guess that's not more of a comment than a question, but I'd be happy to hear any observations that the staff has, and I do respect their position. They have done a yeoman's work on trying to protect and benefit the county.
Tom Delaire for the record, Community Development Director. Thank you, Chairman Mulder. I don't know where to start on this. So there's a lot of documents out there that we wouldn't normally have. This particular site is very unique, where we have the development agreement set in place. We have a specific plan that is, it turns out not that specific and mostly conceptual. Then the conditions of approval and the documentation that we had before that is really unclear. Honestly, we struggled with this one, and trying to come up with the conditions based on those general provisions in the back. Unfortunately, the way that the condition document turns out, you have specific conditions for specific deadlines. So the following conditions must be met prior to the submittal of any future permit for development or construction. And there's some significant number of these, and a lot of those were things that we identified not only on the proposed plan, like the right-of-way at the roundabout, no mention as to the APN at that particular site where the roundabout would encroach into that parcel, but there's also some floodplain designations. There's also some floodplain designations that were created by another professional firm that is doing a CLOMAR for the county on Muller Parkway, where they have identified a new floodway or floodplain boundary, which is stuff that we've added in here that we want to get that coordinated accurately. So it's stuff that I think we can do internally if we had the documents, but we don't even have those documents yet. And so you go down further, and then a lot of these are duplicate comments and conditions. Then the next set is the following conditions must be met at the submittal of a final map. So at that stage, these particular items have to be done, and they are duplicative in nature. And then the last one was throughout the life of the project, and then that set. So we went through this with a fine-tooth comb. We tried to figure out exactly what those conditions were. We also used the document that they provided where there's some minor clarifications in there. We want to approve that. The January 4th letter that came from Eric Nielsen at the town of Gardnerville modified one of those conditions, and we're trying to figure out the verbiage for that. So I need to communicate with Eric on that piece, and then we'll get the final letter out to them on the second amendment, which would clarify all of the minor things that were conditioned previously. Also, the county commission in the meeting approving the specific plan approved Minden's conditions and the town of Gardnerville's conditions at that time from 2020. And those conditions were to meet their Minden's design guidelines. I see what Keith is looking at this point in time, why they proposed the Douglas County Standard Road that wasn't that thing is something I think that we may have missed here at our table, but I know JD was upset about the layout, and we could condition the multifamily if that was amenable to the applicant. We haven't had those conversations yet, mainly due to a meeting that we had on the December 20th, but we haven't had those conversations. So we can go back and have these conversations and try and get this straightened out. The conditions or other general provisions, most of these stemmed from that area, and then looking at those conditions and what they provided in their application to come up with the list of conditions that you saw today at noon.
Thank you very much, Tom. I know everybody's sincere, and hopefully we can come to appropriate resolution at the appropriate time. So let's move to public comment. If you don't mind, we can move to public comment, and then I'm sure some of the board members will have other questions or comments, if that is okay, if there's not something essential that you have to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were just going to ask for just 5-minute break, just to discuss among ourselves whether or not, we should revoke, repeal the specific plan on the record today. So a little timeout if it's to your discretion.
I'd like to go ahead with public comment if that's the pleasure of the board. And then AJ, did you have something before we go to public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, AJ Hames from the District Attorney's Office. I don't think there's anything in code that allows an individual to unilaterally repeal a specific plan. Code speaks of amendments to specific plans, which have to be processed in the same manner as applying for a specific plan in the first place. A specific plan is typically adopted by ordinance or resolution. In this particular case, it was adopted by resolution, so an applicant can't just get rid of it. Also, this board could not approve that today. It's not been agendized. It's not on, there's been no noticing. That's not something that we're considering today. The purpose of today's hearing is to consider the PD application and the tentative subdivision map application. And that is all. And certainly, repeal of the specific plan could be agendized for a later date, but it's not something that the board can consider today.
Excellent points, AJ. We have to be mindful of the open meeting law and public notice.
Could I add one comment?
Just hold on a second. Go ahead. We'll let the attorneys battle, and then the non-attorneys can rejoinder. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I know you did want to get into a tit for tat, so I'll be quick. We just want to make sure we have a clear record here today. I agree that the code says you have to go through the process of an application for an amendment, but this isn't an amendment. This is a repeal rescission of a specific plan, and we do believe we have a right to do that unilaterally, and we do think if we put it on the record today, it would be applicable to the findings that the board would eventually have to look at in the context of conditions of approval. There's no specific plan. There's no conditions of approval related to the specific plan. So just want to put that on the record, and thank you for that indulgence.
Thank you, Paul.
I tend to side with our deputy DA. Once again, I'm not a lawyer in the state of Nevada, but the way that, but I did sleep in a Holiday Inn or whatever it is, Express last night. However, the Douglas County Board of Commissioners in Resolution 2020R-120 on the 17th of December in 2020 voted on the specific plan. I don't think it's even within our purview to be able to take action above that. This is above our pay grade, I think.
Thank you, Paul. Let's move to public comment on this. If you have public comment, please come to the microphone, print your name, state your name, and we'll begin your 3 minutes of time.
Yes, Tim Ald. I am a resident of the Montero 1 subdivision, and I'm probably premature and possibly irrelevant at this point in making this comment, but it's very specific, and it has to do with the extension of Montero Drive into the proposed subdivision. In the December approval, December 28th, 2020, the approval there indicated that Montero Drive was to be developed as a cul-de-sac at the end of the development toward the east side of the existing development. The proposal that I've read currently is that Montero Drive will be extended into the development, and I'm questioning what purpose that would serve and what benefit it would serve, what impact it would have on the residents of our neighborhood and the neighborhood that is to be developed. Basically, it's a 25-mile-an-hour street. It's 3 blocks long. It's closed at both ends, dead end and Hayborn, the end of Hayborn on the other end. It houses the mail receptacles for the homes in that area, and it's adjacent to a school zone, basically. By looking at the maps and the depictions of Montero Drive in the new subdivision, it's a main thoroughfare. So I'm not sure if it's a mismatch there, and whether or not there's going to be widening required, how much construction is going to be done on the infrastructure, on the existing road, and so on. I would just like to be on the record that this is a concern of that neighborhood and of mine. Baylor Drive, I could see because it gives access to the development into the school, Minden Elementary School. That makes sense. The roundabout coming in from Buckeye makes sense. And then the wording of the proposal is a little concerned because it says that the, let's see, it's basically moving the access from, the agricultural access from Buckeye Road to Montero Drive. And I'm not sure what that entails. What is the agricultural access, and will that be immediate? The other concern I have is it's a requirement on the proposal to complete that extension of Montero before phase 1. And I'm not sure why that is essential, whether it could be done after phase 1 or during phase 2 or down the road. If the connection makes sense at that time, my proposal or my solution would be to look at it at that time. And then I also don't understand why there's no access shown from the proposed extension of Muller Parkway. Whether or not that's possible or whether that could be considered another solution that could be looked at. And that's all I've got.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that staff will take those questions under advisement as they move forward on this. Further public comment?
Good afternoon, Ellie Waller. I'm relatively new to this county, and I'm still trying to figure out processes, how they unfold. So I come often with questions that may not seem like they're relevant or relative to this. So I apologize for any wasted time that I bring forward. But I'd like to thank staff for the phasing clarification. I don't believe it is an extraordinary effort to have to come back and do extensions. All developers come back with proposed extensions if necessary. Again, these are my opinions. I don't know how you can make findings today on any of the traffic if you haven't read it. I haven't read the report. I noticed it was out there, did grab a copy. I don't know if it's relevant or not. That just brings the question forward in the future. The additional analysis that probably should be required for the Justice Center. Being adjacent to that will have different traffic than what a subdivision would have or anything else as a farm as it used to be stated. Options being explored for the flood control basin. I know another comment came in today. I just read that on the table, so I'm not sure if that's relevant or is going to be looked at. Does discretion by community development supersede developer interpretation? It's probably something that needs to also be looked at. And the attorney today mentioned interpretation includes may occur. So I don't know definition of may. When I read all the documentations, I look word for word. I still have some concerns about what an agri-hood is, definitions that don't occur or I can't find anywhere in Title 20 or Douglas County Code. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment? Seeing no additional public comment, I'll close public comment. And if the applicant would like to take a 5 or 10-minute recess and have further discussions, we'll entertain a 10-minute recess. Come back at 4:30. Mark, if you can hear me now, we are ready to reconvene. And where we left off, public comment was closed, and the applicant requested a recess so that they could discuss amongst themselves and in other forms what they might like to say at this point before the Planning Commission moves forward with deliberating. And Kate, if you have some comments, I would defer to you first before we hear from the applicant.
Thank you, Chairman Walder. Kate Morales O'Neill, Planning Manager. So we have collaborated, and staff now would recommend approval based on giving directions to staff and the applicant that we sit down and come to an agreement with the conditions prior to the Board of County Commissioners. So we will, again, recommend approval, but that the conditions we will have to agree to prior to moving forward to the Board of County Commissioners. We don't believe the findings are going to change. We do believe the findings will still be met. It's the conditions based on the specific plan, what's conceptual, what's not, what's specific, what's not. And I think just our short conversation, we will be able to agree on the conditions moving forward and the ones that we feel are really important and the ones that I think we might be able to move away from.
Thank you very much, Kate. Would the applicant's representative like to speak to this issue as well?
First of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the indulgence in letting us meet. Yes, we have decided at this point not to repeal the specific plan and to agree with that recommended motion of approving the applications, subject to direction to applicant and staff to work on conditions prior to the regularly scheduled Board of County Commission hearing for this item.
Thank you very much. I'll bring it back to the Planning Commission for discussion of the idea that has been advanced by staff and the applicant for your comments or potentially to move to a motion. Mark, any thoughts on your end before I move to people here in the room?
No, let's hear from them, but I think that what staff and the applicant has said is very good. That's music to my ears that everybody gets together.
Thank you very much, Mark. Dave.
Yeah, I think that this should have worked out before we were here. So I don't know how I'm going to vote at this point, but I'm not happy with this.
Thank you. Comments? Paul, Maureen, Bryce? Paul?
Basically, the motion that would be before us is approval of the issues that are currently conditioned upon agreement between staff and the applicant to finalize the conditions. Is that stated correctly?
A.J. Ames from the District Attorney's Office for the record. Mr. Gordon can jump in if he thinks I'm misstating this. But yeah, I think one way to phrase it would be if you do go along with the recommendation of the parties, would be that you are recommending approval on the condition that the parties are able to meet and confer and agree to a set of conditions prior to presentation to the Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you, AJ. Maureen, comments? Bryce, comments? Maureen.
So we are trusting staff. And I do. But I still want to get my 2 cents in on what's important to me. When I sat down to go through the packet, the first thing that jumped at me is the Buckeye Farm specific plan shall be adopted by ordinance in accordance with county policy. The Buckeye Farm specific plan has been developed as both a regulatory document as well as a land use policy plan. 5 of us here sat here when it was adopted in 2019. And I voted no because I had issues with the process, not with the specific plan and not with the so-called agrihood. I don't like that word, but the whole concept of what David was presenting is lovely. And it's wonderful. The project in and of itself Everything about it is fabulous. And I want to see that work out. And I wish you the very best with it. But the amenities that were presented in this phase are not there. And I want to see them, and that's what I'm trusting staff to come forward with. The Greenway, which is not there. The multifamily and the little center park, that is not there. I like that the Ag Meander is along the outside, but that and the Greenway are two separate things. And that David is continuing with the ag and the native pasture around the outside is wonderful. I like that. I'd like to see that the water, the surface water that is going throughout the entire project, I'd like to see those water rights tied to the land. And if we can negotiate that, we do have water rights under number 10 in the conditions allocated, but I'd like to see those tied down, if we can get that worked out. And then one thing that with the phasing plan, this may have been R3 at one time. Now this is R1. And now that this is R1, I think the multifamily should be included. And also, there is a deed restriction with regards to the agriculture, which I think is excellent. I think that's very, very important, because anyone who moves into this project with the 2200, they need to respect that park was there first. And park is going to stay there. And they need to respect the agriculture that's around it. But they also need to recognize that the airport is there. And I live in Windhaven, and the airplanes go over, and the noise is there. The glider goes over, and it's very noisy. And so we need to have a deed restriction with regards to the airport noise. So if we add that to the conditions. And there is an airport zone that is identified in the specific plan. So I think the deed restriction has a place. And my last statement is, if the PC allows the applicant to bypass the amenities stated in the specific plan going forward in phase 1, a precedent is being set for the consecutive phases, and it must not be allowed, as it will have consequences not just for Minden and Gardnerville, but for the county as a whole. And while I respect the applicant's right to negotiate with the county on the conditions going forward, I think that it's a two-way street. And hopefully that we can work this out, and it'll be a win-win for all of us. We don't want Montero flipped. We want to hold to the specific plan and have something that's more in line with the agri-hood concept that they had coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen.
Commissioner Casey. And just so you know, you were looking over at staff. I do not have a memory like an elephant. I just will listen back to the thing and I will take notes. So that's why I'm not taking notes, but I will go back and listen to the meeting, and that's when I take my notes.
Thank you, Kate. Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've spent my entire 30-year career learning how to compromise, and the more I've learned about it, the more I've found that it has benefited not only my business, but my life. And so I commend both of you for taking a moment and going outside and working through that, because I think the options that were before us were not good for either of you. And so I'm glad we weren't put in a position to have to make a call on either one of those. So thank you. I think a good contribution or good compromise is when everybody makes a contribution and both parties walk away feeling like they had to give up something. And so I'm sure that's what's going to happen. I hope that you can work through that. And I appreciate you doing that, because this is a great project. It's great for our community. And I think that I don't think there was any malice in how we got here. I think I understand, Mr. Park, your urgency. I mean, time is money. I get it, and we got to get going. And staff, this comes in November, and it's the holidays. I mean, let's just face it, things just don't move very fast during the holidays, and people are gone. And so I don't think anybody there was no ill will here. It just the timing sucked, and unfortunately, we were put in a position here where now we have to make a recommendation on something that we haven't read, and so. Again, I don't want to belabor the point. Thank you for not putting us in that position, because I don't think it would have bode well for either party. And so I encourage you to work through it. I see no reason why you can't, and that this get resolved before the Board of County Commissioners, and we get on with this development and get this thing going. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Bryce. Paul.
Just a couple of points of order. If we do what's contemplated, what I articulated, and by the way, it's going to be very difficult now that Commissioner Casey identified a number of items that should be in the motion, such as deed restrictions, et cetera, and I can't remember them all either, so it's going to be a very difficult motion to make. But is there a default to this such that by a certain time, if an agreement has not been reached, then the application is deemed denied?
AJ Hames from the District Attorney's Office. The application would ultimately be approved or denied by the Board of County Commissioners. And so what the recommendation, as I understand it, that's proposed, and if that were what the commission wants to do, would be to recommend that the board approve it on condition that the parties are able to meet and confer and reach consensus on a set of conditions of approval. That would occur before the board meeting. Ultimately, if we got to the board meeting and for whatever reason we just couldn't come to terms on certain conditions, then the recommendation of this commission would be unchanged. You'd be recommending approval on condition we reach consensus. And if we haven't reached consensus, you're in essence recommending denial. And so that would be then in the board's hands to decide whether they want to deny it because we haven't come to a consensus, or whether they want to act as sort of the judge and decide which conditions of approval to ultimately go with.
So it's a condition precedent that the agreement occur.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you, AJ. Thank you, Paul. Bryce, do you want to make a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am, based on development agreement reference 2019-933727, I recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners for plan development, tentative subdivision map, application DP 23-0235, Buckeye Farm Neighborhood 1, establishing a PD overlay zone for 89.39 acres that includes 354 SFR 8,000 residential lots and 7.1 plus or minus acres of PS zoning for the greenways and a park, subject to the applicant and staff meeting and working to resolve the conditions that have been proposed prior to the Board of County Commissioners meeting.
Thank you, Bryce. Is there a second?
Second, with a request for friendly amendment, which is instead of subject to, say, as a condition precedent, that an agreement is reached. So the approval is made with a condition precedent that agreement is reached on the conditions.
I'm not sure I see the distinction. AJ, did you catch what nuance?
If I could, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Bryce.
My motion was subject to the applicant and staff meeting and working to resolve the conditions before us prior to the Board of County. So it's implied that there's an agreement.
I just don't like implications, that's all. Thanks.
Is there a second to Bryce's motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Paul. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, then I'll call for a voice vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to the motion? no opposition. So on this vote, there's 6 votes aye, no votes nay, and the motion is agreed to. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate your diligence. We do have closing public comment. So at this point, I'll open it up to closing public comment. Seeing no closing public comment, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.